And we're off. Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. Happy transfer deadline day to all of the football fans around the world. Although unlikely at the moment, it's Tottenham fans. If you're for the first time, you can find us on iTunes or on Spotify or across all major audio platforms. We're going to be with you from now until the close of this January transfer window, where Thomas Frank has said and insisted Tottenham Hotspur remain active going into the final 10 to 15 hours of this January transfer window. Kicking us off on what we hope is going to be a day of optimism, on what we hope is going to be a day in which we see potentially a couple. Am I going too far there? One sign that's going to hopefully come in and improve the squad. Back alongside me, I've got Billy T in the house. Bill, I know for many this is Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, wrapped into one depending on what happens. How are you feeling, Bill, on this deadline day?
Yeah, not very Christmassy at the moment, is it? But, hopefully something will come out of the blue because, with, as we spoke about last week, mate, it's been a bit of a dry January, hasn't it? But let's see what happens. We've got one more day to go to pull a rabbit out of the hat somewhere.
Bill, thank you for joining us. And there are already links coming through which we are going to share on this show. Also, back alongside us, we've got, listen, if any transfers are going to happen, this man's going to be the best at breaking them down. We've got Ash back in the building from Spurs Kings. Ash, lovely to have you here. How are you, Bo? I'll get you to unmute. It's an early morning start, so everyone's going to have a bit of caffeine before we get going. Ash, how are you?
Yeah, big up, man. Thanks for having me on again. Big up to the chat as always. And listen, look, we'll see what happens, man. You can never tell with this club. I remember, was it last January? And we were down in the pits. And all of a sudden, the Tell news kind of broke out of nowhere.
That's right. Yep.
And we managed to get him out of nowhere. I didn't see that one coming. So, yeah, we'll see. I know Thomas Frank's given us a little bit of optimism, a little bit of hope. But me, I like to kind of stay kind of level-headed, keep calm. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, bro, it is what it is.
Listen, coming on to one man, I know, like us all, wants to see definitely some action on this final day of the transfer window. We've got the wonderful Jonathan Hammy back with us from Football Link, talking Tottenham 1882. He was present in that stadium and probably saw the need to bring in reinforcements. John, love to have you here, mate. How are you?
I'm okay. Not quite as chilled as Ash. Ash is like really laid back, take it as it comes. Yeah, no problem. I'm a little bit more sort of agitated because look, this is meant to be the time where we get excited as football fans.
Of course.
When you said, we're off to the races, I thought I was on a different show for a minute. And then you said to me that we are active in the market. Well, I've just got
to Thomas Frank.
Apparently, Johan Lang's alarm should go off at 11 o'clock this morning. He'll get out of bed and maybe he'll pull his finger out of his backside and pull a rabbit out the hat. Well, I prefer a player. But
my worry is that you actually would pull a rabbit out.
Yeah, it's more chance of a rabbit, to be honest. But listen, we live in hope. We live in hope. Look, the difference is between him and Fabio. Fabio liked the glitz, the glamour, spinning the plates, everyone knowing his business, linking us to every Tom, Dick and Harry. Whereas Johan Lang seems to work in the shadows and maybe, working like that will have a surprise transfer that no one saw coming.
Possibly. Let's wrap up where we are currently going into this deadline day of January. We're hearing reports suggesting that Anton Kinsky, who at one point he was going to be going to West Ham during this transfer window, as things stand, he's going to be remaining at Spurs on this deadline day, barring any further late move from West Ham United. So as things stand, Spurs will not be on the lookout for another goalkeeper on this deadline day. Kinsky looks like he's going to be staying put and will remain a Tottenham Hotspur player. In other news, and, I think this is really worth bringing into the show because, again, this might dictate what happens on this January transfer window deadline day. We are hearing reports with regards to Kevin Danso that the initial concern over his injury may be one of long term, and that's doing the rounds at the moment on social media, where it's going to be evaluated further this week. But initial assessments point to a long-term injury. And, of course, in addition to Kevin Danso, Jed Spence, as things stand at the moment, is unlikely to return to the 11. We're hearing reports probably not until late February. So he's obviously got a calf injury for those that picked up Thomas Frank's post-match press conference after the game yesterday against Manchester City. It means at the moment Tottenham are currently without 12 senior first-team players going into the second half of the season, where, of course, we know Spurs are going to be competing in both the Premier League and, of course, the Champions League. In terms of what we heard this morning in relation to any incomings, there has been tentative links already with regards to a certain Barcelona player. And forgive me, this is my first time pronouncing it, and it actually be a lot more well-equipped, and probably the boys will be rather than me trying to pronounce this to you. But I believe he goes with the name of Ronald Araujo, who could be coming to Tottenham on this deadline day. There's tentative links out there. Spurs are showing their interest in the player, so that is one to certainly keep an eye on. We're also hearing reports from Ali Gold that George Abbott, of course, Tottenham Hotspur, I say youth academy product, he's been around the club now for quite a long time. He's currently, at the moment, potentially on his way to Mansfield Town on loan until the end of the season. So, look, that's currently where we stand. We're expecting Kinsky to remain at the club, despite suggestions that West Ham are keen on the player. Tottenham understood to be reluctant to let him go on this deadline day. And tentative links to that Barcelona player, Ronald Araujo. Let's go to you, Ash. Ash, what would you read into that in terms of that Barcelona player? Is that something we should keep an eye on? Is that throwaway links out there? What's your gauge at the moment in terms of what we really linked on?
Yeah, I think looking at his history, I think there was a few stories around him in terms of his mentality. I think he had a wobble at Barcelona, and he had to kind of go away and get himself together. He had a few high-profile mistakes where he lost his concentration.
He'll fit in well. He'll fit in well.
But before that, I think he was well regarded as a centre back. He's quite mobile. He's fast. He's strong, aggressive. He's South American. Comes from Uruguay. 26 years old. He's that type of age where he should be starting to get into his prime as a defender. But I think Garcia's come along, and he's. I think the manager's looking at him more and choosing him over this particular defender. However, he's a bit more on the faster side to maybe like a Dragushin, and maybe that's why the club are looking at him, because Danso is picked up that knock, and it's a bit more serious than we previously thought. So maybe that's why there's loose rumors. I don't know how true they are, but yeah, he's someone that's quite physical, strong, fast, and can play in like that kind of high line system if Spurs needed to, if we wanted to be a bit more aggressive, because we saw the way we were playing against City were a bit more aggressive on that first half, a bit more on the front foot, and he could be a person that could suit Spurs, obviously. But yeah, who knows at this point? It's transfer deadline day, anything can happen. So let's see what happens, man.
Absolutely. Bill, to come over to you. Again, like I say, at the moment, tentative links. Kinsky probably looking likely to stay as things stands. Got this links, of course, to the Barcelona player. No news on Robertson as to whether Spurs will go back in. It feels maybe that might be a situation where if they throw enough money at it, you probably would get in this window, despite Liverpool's need for potentially a replacement. Gut feeling, Bill, in terms of these tentative links so far. Are you holding out any hope, Bill, there'll be something being pulled out of a hat rather than a rabbit from Johan Lang?
Yeah. I think there'll be one. I think there'll be one somewhere. I think it'll probably go down to. I think it might come out the blue. And I'm not sure any of the names that we mentioned so far will get over the line. I think someone might come out the blue somewhere. I think we're desperate, man. We have to get someone in just because we're so thin on the ground. Like 12 outfield players yesterday, 12 outfield players versus Frankfurt. 2 injuries since Frankfurt. You know, Romero's got ill. We are desperate, man. Like Thomas Frank is. Desperately needs players to get through this, horrible run of fixtures that we got. And we made an okay start yesterday with a draw against Man City, but we've got some real tough games coming up as we keep talking, and we're absolutely thin on the ground. We've got one fit fullback at the moment. Sousa's not obviously made an appearance for us, but Udogie is our only fit fullback right now. We've got centre backs all over the place with Danso injured, Rickert van der Ven injured, desperately for bodies there. And all season since summer, we've been crying out for more goals in the forward line. So there's a lot to do. Can't see us addressing all those problems, but we've got to address one. Like we're desperate for more bodies, I think. And I think hopefully they'll be scrambling around today, because if they don't sign anyone today, then I think they've left another manager really short.
What's the priority, Bill? If you had one area of the pitch to strengthen, what would that area be now for you?
I've got to go for the front three, someone in the front three, just because it's been a problem all season. I know Solanke's back now, which is good, but again, he hobbled off yesterday. But we're still missing a lot of goals in that front three for me. We don't have anyone there that's prolific other than Solanke now. So I'd like to see a wide player or a forward come in for sure.
Yeah, one man that always feels he's got his ear to the ground, and it feels like he's our own potential Dharma chef on this deadline day, is Jonathan Hammy back on the show. Of course, these three faces were here when we did that Eze show. My God. We're never going to live that down, are we? We're never going to live that day down.
It's all right nowadays, isn't it? We've got Xavi. It's okay. We did all right in the end.
Yeah.
Let it all work out. Let it all work out, hopefully, in time. John, what's your gauge for you in terms of where we are on this deadline day? Very, very quiet at the moment, but are you the same as Bill? Do you share some optimism that you're going to see one come through the door potentially? Where are you on that?
Look, I think the club have massively let both the fans and the manager down. There's no other words to describe it really. You describe your intentions when Daniel left, then you stated them again, unequivocal, that you realise what's wrong and what's needed before the West Ham protest, and here we are at the midnight hour as the sun's about to set. And we're still scrapping around. Listen, when they said Ronald Araujo, I thought it was going to be Ronald McDonald at one stage. That's how bad it's got at the club. I think it's almost like we need a whole pitch full of players. I mean, that performance yesterday, based on the fact that, we've got nobody to really turn to. A lot of the players are in the red zone. There's a cry of help there. I mean, listen, the one thing, Thomas Frank hasn't thrown them under the bus, saying, that they've completely screwed up this window. But let's be honest, they have. And I'm like Billy, I think we need someone in attack. I'd take a punt on John Duran. I mean, listen, I reckon you can pick him up now with a loan with a potential option. He was doing well at Villa. He's still only 22 years of age. Weird move. Well, we know why he went to his from his Egyptian mates with the Saudi owners to Saudi Arabia to sort out Villa's FFP. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, he's in Turkey, where it hasn't completely worked out. But he does have an eye for goal. He's not a bad forward. And, just to get some bodies in, he knows where the net is. And as I say, at 22, he's still improving. So I'd maybe have a punt on him. But I think Araujo is basically a reactionary, obviously. Again, it's amazing how quick they can move for a reactionary signing. But 4 months of planning to actually do some transfer business, which is their main job, nothing's happened. I can't see Robinson coming. Jeremy Jacquet's move from Rennes is going to come through, but that's not going to affect Robertson because they can't get Tsimikas out of Roma. So right now, it's I don't know. I mean, I'm just praying that there's something that we don't know about, that no one knows about. But
John, you mentioned Duran there. From what we're hearing, is he available? Do we know if he's available for?
I think he's available. He's been offered around.
Right.
Listen, he wants to obviously play for Colombia. He's Colombian international. I think he has something about him. Look, it could be attitude out there, but you have to question why a 21-year-old goes for 70 million. He was never worth 70 million out to Saudi. That's a friend sorting each other out deal. Look, he's played, and Villa fans really liked him. They were upset when he left. Granted, he came off the bench, but why can't he come off the bench for us? Dom Solanke needs a rest. You can see we're going to push him and push him and push him. You can't be out for months on end and be expected to do 90 minutes. It's too much. It's too much. He's going to break down again. Been saying it for the last game and a half now. 60 minutes, get him off. Keep him fresh.
Yeah. Gut feeling, Bill, coming over to you. I mean, we're at a point now where, like we keep saying, we do feel like we're in this kind of desperate hour now, rather than the fact of being proactive, we're now being reactive. Is there that concern, Bill? That, I mean, you've been on the last couple of deadline days, that if we go back to the last few of them where, as we know, Spurs were in from Awani only, a couple of seasons ago, a year and a half ago, like ended up with Matisse Tell. They've then gone back to Kolo Muani. How important is it, Bill, that we all want players to come in, but how important is it, Bill, we get the right profile of players in that it doesn't in any way disrupt the squad? Because I think there's a degree of feeling that, I think we mean it's all due respect, it doesn't feel like we've got 100% good eggs in that dressing room. And the worry would be is if you're going to add to that dressing room, you don't want to bring anyone that's going to disrupt it even further. So how critical is it? You know, I feel there's a thing now around Thomas Frank that we're going to try and stumble our way to the end of the season with him, barring a catastrophe. How important is it, Bill, that we are bringing in the right profile of player on this deadline day? And it goes back to that word that we always seem to go back to on this show a lot, due diligence. How important is that, Bill, on this deadline day, that we don't make any further mistakes in terms of bringing in the wrong profile of player?
Yeah, it's really important because, you know, as much as we all want players, I mean, we've seen the Muani transfer in particular, which was another deadline day transfer, and the summer transfer window has been a bit mixed. And, you know, even Tell, you know, a player that, and the trouble is, if you sign too many players, you're not going to be able to keep them all happy. Obviously, we haven't been able to keep Tell happy. He wants to leave. I think, to be honest with you, I think that he's been a bit unlucky with the amount of minutes that he's received. So I think it's really important. And obviously Spurs have been targeting players like Robertson. You know, they're trying to improve the quality of character in the dressing room, and they're trying to get experience and possibly players that have won it all, you know. But I think it's important. If you get the right player, if you go back to a few years ago when we were scrambling around mid-table with Conte, at this time in January, then we signed two players on deadline day, Kulusevski and Bentancur, and they were essentially the sort of ingredient which managed to go on a run from this time, and then we had a huge run of wins and ended up finishing fourth that season. So if you get it right on deadline day, it can have a massive impact. So I think there's still optimism that we can do something which can really, you know, change our season, because, you know, I kind of feel like I want to, as a fan, stop looking below me in the table now. I want to start looking up. But, you know, it was a good result yesterday, but we're still no wins in 7. So let's not forget the fact that we need to improve in the league, definitely. So, you know, yeah. I think a couple of signings on deadline day could hopefully have that Kulusevski factor that we saw a couple of years ago.
Yeah, you make a really important point there, Ash, coming over to you, the fact that we're yet to register a domestic win in 2026. I'll go back to that point. How important is it, Ash, as well for you that, look, whilst we want to bring in quality to the squad, we're not just bringing in players in just for a body, and they're actually going to make a genuine difference in terms of going to affect the first team. Ash, what's your gut feeling on that for you?
Yeah, it all depends on, are they going to be a starter? At this point, it's very hard because it's so late in the window, and you know that these transfers, when we're doing them, they take months of preparation, and we've obviously failed on set A, B, C, and now we're looking at options probably D and E. I know our first option was probably Semenyo. We know what happened with that. Semenyo, obviously, he signed a new contract and then got injured, so that fell through. And then we're looking at players like Al-Kalouche. Now, I don't know if that's gone completely dead, but obviously he's a player who we've been looking at for a while. We've had many scouts look at him. I know he's on the right wing and we're looking for a left winger, but at this point where we don't have many options, that might have to be an option where we're talking about summer deals, bringing them through a bit earlier. We might have to force one of these ones a bit forward. So if you want the right mix, as you guys were talking about, mentality, is he going to upset the squads? Is he going to rock the boat? You probably look at a player like him to get in. I know, like, ideally you want someone of a higher level that could come in and hit the ground running. But as you guys were saying, we're quite light at the moment in the squads. And so bringing him in could add some quality, and that could help obviously lift the squad, and also the fans would be quite happy as well. So you kind of killed two birds with one stone, and then you kind of look at that left wing in the summer, because there's not many quality players we're going to get in at this moment. However, he has played on the left wing before, so it's not completely out of the thinking where we could put him on the left side. He is left-footed, so it could work. But right now, as it goes, yeah, if you don't want bad attitudes and you want the right mentality, he is French. The only caveat I could say to my own self is that you've got Matisse Tell, that's French. You've got obviously Wilson Odobert, he's French. And then you've got obviously the striker we brought in as well. He's French as well. You've got quite a few French guys in there. Is that too many French players? I don't know. Is that a good thing? Maybe that they're all French. They can speak. I don't know. So possibly we could bring that kid in. He's 23 years old. He's not too young, because a lot of people have been complaining about, you know, opportunist and having players that, you know, have a high ceiling, but they can't hit the ground running. Now he's someone that could possibly help contribute to the squad right now and help us get us out of a situation. We are 14th, by the way. We have to remind ourselves. And so we're not able to get the Premier League creme de la creme. I don't want to talk about across the road, and we know who they've been linked with, but at this current time, maybe that's the player we should be going for if we're going to try and get this business so late in the window.
John, just back to your point around Duran, there are suggestions that he may not be the greatest in terms of mentality, kind of mindset, and that kind of topic I went back to it about bringing in players that are good for the dressing room. Would you have any concern over that? The fact if you're going to bring players in that are going to upset the apple cart further? I only say that because I don't know if you agree. I mean, I just feel at the moment that it's similar to when Pochettino, before he came in under Sherwood, that you just feel there's a few players there that, are they playing for themselves? Are they really playing for the team? It just feels like we haven't got everybody on board right now. And you can also understand that I think some players are disillusioned by where the club is going. I think probably there is a lot of questions around the ownership, which of course Romero has called out publicly. Would there be a concern, again, going back to that point, you're going to bring in a player on deadline day that could disrupt that even further? Or are you at a point now where really it's hard to do due diligence on the final day? What's your gut feeling on that?
I think a manager can manage a player who's a little bit volatile, like handling a bit of Semtex, maybe, that he can handle him for 3 months, 4 months. That's all he's got to handle him for. You know, you tell him the story, look, this is your chance. It's got World Cup coming up. You know, get yourself together. I mean, look, I think that from what's available out there, we've not gone from Lookman, which for me was strange. I know maybe some are really for him and some are really against him, but he definitely would have helped us. I don't see a lot of other things out there. You know, Duran, Diaby, Curtis Jones, and, you know, a couple of others. But, you know, I think he could be the thing for us. He's 22 years of age, like I said, you know, and he can score a goal. I mean, the likelihood is that when the window closes, we'll see a picture with Vinay and Johan Lang with our signing, which will be Palhinha. They'll probably announce that on the deadline day that he signed on a permanent. That will be it.
Yeah, I mean, we are just hearing reports through to us here from Ali Gold that is suggesting that Mason Melia, who's only come to us in January,
he's injured.
He's injured, but Spurs apparently are not looking to loan him out. Is that what you think, Johnny, based on he's injured, rather than the fact that we see him actually play for Spurs? You think it's to do with that rather than anything around the fact?
Well, yeah. I mean, sorry to interrupt. Right? No, he's listen. He's a strong player, but I mean, he doesn't have any experience in the Premier League, coming from the Irish League. I mean, he is a huge prospect, but I think they're probably like Sousa, keep him under their wing and watch them and see how they mature. But listen, look, you know, they've let Dane Scarlett go, so maybe they see something in Melia, but he's definitely injured at the moment. So I can't see anyone signing an Irish player on loan who hasn't played a single minute in the Premier League, who's currently injured. Makes no sense to me.
Do you think, beyond that, would that dampen potential expectations over a forward coming in by the fact that Melia is staying put? Or do you agree with Johnny? He's injured at the moment, therefore, who's going to really take a gamble on a kid that isn't Premier League proven and probably needs to acclimatise to the club that he's only just come to? What do you think on that for you, Bill?
I mean, that would be absolutely classic Tottenham, wouldn't it, to use this as a sort of, you know, to instead of signing a player that's more ready and more likely to impact in the first team. I got really high hopes about this kid. I remember watching a few clips of him in Ireland that were really good, but to be potentially relying on an 18-year-old in his first senior season in the Premier League would be crazy, I think. And I'd rather sign the more experienced player and maybe see how this guy develops, because it's just asking a lot for an 18-year-old to come straight into the Premier League, particularly a striker as well. That's generally speaking the hardest position to come in as a young player and make an impact. So that would be typical Tottenham to try and use this as a rather than going out and signing a quality player, I think.
He's a big talent. I mean, he's a big
huge
talent, right? I mean, let's not play it down. I mean, we had that Troy Parrott was the next Robbie Keane, but when I've spoken to Irish guys that contact me, they say no, he's levels above Troy Parrott. Well, if that's the case, maybe we're sort of dismissing his abilities, because we all know what Troy's doing over in Holland now. I think he's got about 20 goals this season. And maybe he has physicality. That's the one thing. He looks like a physical specimen. He handles himself well. He speaks well. I think he has all the attributes, and, long may it be. Please God that he comes and has a great career at Spurs and turns into half of 3/4 of a Robbie Keane. It would be great.
There's no pressure on him, because they say his playing style is a bit like Harry Kane, don't they? So no pressure there.
No pressure.
just to try and realise expectations, right? Ash, what's that news for you? I mean, does that dampen your expectations of someone coming in, or is that the reality of what the boy said there? He's injured at the moment. So realistically, who's going to pick up a kid that's injured? And again, he's trying to acclimatise to new situations, new surrounding, a new league. I mean, it doesn't really make sense, does it, for him to go out on loan at the moment? It probably makes sense for him to stay and acclimatise to Tottenham. God help him.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a mess at the club at the moment. That the fact that we're talking about Mason Melia on deadline day, do you know what I mean? It just sums it up right now. Yes, we might have a lot of talent, and he might be the next big thing. But yeah, I think where we're at the moment is you kind of want to protect some of these young players, let them acclimatize, get them used to the way of what we're doing at the moment, and then maybe loan them out. But yeah, any talk about Mason Melia right now is way too early, in my opinion. And right now we are clutching at straws. We really are, but this is this is how bad it's got. Do you know what I mean?
It's only 9:45 UK time. Don't say we're clutching at straws already. We've only just started. This is meant to be the positive shift.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I haven't got much to say on it, I'll be honest with you, bro. Like Mason Melia, what can we do? What can we say?
Okay, well, look, let's give everyone a bit of a deadline day morning roundup as to where we are right now at what the time is now, 9:46 a.m. UK time. So the latest news on the Spurs beat right now, for those that are joining us, and thanks to we've already got 6,500 in the building on deadline day. Quite unbelievable, really, bearing in mind we've only just started what we hope is going to be some kind of a positive show and a crescendo come the end of it. So latest news to bring to you is we understand that Anton Kinsky is going to stay at Tottenham Hotspur despite reported interest from West Ham United. It's understood Spurs are reluctant to loan out Kinsky on this deadline day, and there's a suggestion that if Spurs were to loan out Kinsky, then of course they'd have to find a replacement potentially, unless they were to give Austin that opportunity in terms of being the backup goalkeeper. In terms of other Tottenham news, we understand that George Abbott is potentially heading over to Mansfield Town to join them on loan until the end of the season. As we also just touched upon a couple of seconds ago, we understand Mason Melia is to remain a Tottenham Hotspur player on this January transfer deadline day, where he's going to be given the opportunity to acclimatise. And like the boys already touched upon, he is injured at the moment, and therefore you'd imagine that would, of course, not make the player be able to really partake in any kind of medical examination unless they can bypass certain elements of that medical, and he will remain a Tottenham Hotspur player. And in terms of rumours, in terms of incomings, we've heard tentative links to the Barcelona player Ronald Araujo on this deadline day. And of course, we will bring you all the latest news right until the deadline. And like I say, guys out there, just make sure you've got that notification bell on, so you are ready to know any latest news on Tottenham in and around what we hope is going to be an interesting deadline day. Let's just move the conversation on slightly, guys. I mean, what I'm keen to ask, coming over to you, John, is Thomas Frank, where we are with him. It does feel that a lot of the noise around him, whilst for some it is still there, that degree of it is slowly being toned down now, because there's an acknowledgement that at the moment, similar to Ange last season, he's got, at the moment, Thomas Frank, 12 senior first team players missing. So I just wonder how much that has impacted Tottenham this window around the noise of Thomas Frank in terms of not being able to forward plan, not being able to pre-plan, even for players in terms of knowing who they're playing under. Would you say that's been a contributing factor, Johnny, in terms of the manager's future being so up in the air, and maybe why Spurs have been reluctant to spend money to give Thomas Frank the best possible chance this season? They may have already made their mind up. What's your gauging it for you?
Listen, I'm loath to do comparisons because it's a thankless game, really. But Ange, he had his defence decimated. That was where he had his problems.
Yep.
But he was playing a very aggressive style of football, which didn't take into account that decimation. So he had no interest in sorting that out. Hence some of the defeats. But I think with Frank's the injury that Frank has are, for me, much more widespread. Definitely affecting creativity, definitely affecting goals. And now it's spread, first of all, it was mainly in attack. Then it was mainly through the middle and our creativity. Now it's gone on to the back. It's widespread. And I don't really know how you cope with that. I don't think they haven't bought anybody because they're getting rid of Thomas Frank in the summer or next week. I just think that they're just the upheaval of taking Daniel Levy out of the club, where he controlled everything, so much so that when they removed him, he was trying to make his position such a key man that if you take me out of it, the whole pack of cards is going to come falling down. And I think that's what's more or less happened, where everything had to be reorganized and restructured. And whilst all that's going on, it's all very well restructuring that, but you need to restructure the most important part, and that is the pitch, on the pitch, the players, the team, because everything revolves around that. And I think in that respect, they've let the fans and Thomas Frank down, because, if you've been planning for 4 months, how many phone calls have you got to make to an agent to say, Semenya, yeah, we tried. Would he come? No, he ain't going to come. He's got City and Liverpool, right? 2 seconds, right? It does not take months. Yeah. I don't want to hear, he's supporting the board and Johan Lang, but they're not supporting him. That's the way I see it. And unless, look, it's very possible, Ricky, sad to say it, that whatever the situation is now, come Man United on the weekend, and after that game, it could be a lot worse, because I think there's a lot of players who are overplayed and are suffering because of it. And who's going to go next?
This is the question. We have had some news come through to us here via Miguel Delaney, and we'll come over to Bill and then go to Ash on this. So Miguel Delaney reporting that Spurs are looking for a forward on this January transfer window deadline day. As things stand, I don't know if you even class him as a forward, but Monaco are understood to be reluctant to let Aguiluch leave without any form of a replacement. However, maybe he's been listening to Johnny in the last half hour, 40 minutes or so, because it's understood John Duran is a possibility on this January window transfer deadline day, along with Moussa Diaby, who looked like he was going to be on the verge of moving to Inter Milan. That has fallen through, and we understand his agent has been in London over the last 24, 48 hours, talking to numerous clubs about a potential deadline day move. Bill, your thoughts on that? Like I say, at the moment, Monaco not allowing Aguiluch to go without a replacement. Diaby, Duran, also possibilities. What do we think about that, Bill?
Yeah, finally, that's the kind of links that we want to see, right? Some first team ready players to come in and improve the attack, definitely. I mean, of the three, Akliouche would be my massively preference, because as Ash was saying at the beginning of the show, you know, he's going to be one of the best talents in Europe probably, and he is ready-made. You know, he's 23, but he's ready to come in straight away and play and start, and he will be a huge talent. The other two players have played in the Premier League before to mixed success. Both had a couple of good spells at Villa. I'd always have a slight question mark over players that have been to Saudi, because it's a really poor league. But, you know, I think we're desperate at the moment, and I would much rather be linked with these players that are ready-made to come in and make an impact straight away than nothing. So I'll take it for sure. I'd love to sign any of those three at this point, because, as we mentioned before, we're desperate for some forwards. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a bit of magic we can do somewhere to help Monaco get a replacement for Akliouche, get Paratici on that. He loves to do that kind of thing. So let's get them a replacement and get Akliouche in.
Ash, coming over to you, gut feeling. What do you make of those recent links? I'd say at the moment, it's understood Spurs keen on a forward on this deadline day. Would like to bring Akliouche to the football club. Monaco need a replacement. And as we understand at the moment, both Diaby, Duran now seen as potential options for Spurs on this deadline day, Ash.
Yeah, Diaby is an interesting one because Johan Langer did bring him to Aston Villa, and he had the stint at Bayer Leverkusen, where he got something like 8 to 9 goals in the Bundesliga. I think it was around 22, 23 those times. And he got a lot of assists down there as well, similar to like maybe what Xavi was doing for RB Leipzig. But then he went to Villa and he started off well. And I think he ended up with like 6 goals and 8 assists. But he was in competition with Leon Bailey, and sometimes he was preferred over him. Started off well, and as I said, petered out towards the end. Then he got the move over to Saudi, and now he's looking for a move back. French player again. Maybe he's looking for that kind of that move as well, in terms of like putting his career back on track, getting to that France side. Who knows? But again, he's the one that has got proven experience, and therefore maybe we could do with that. We could get a player that's quite explosive, direct, can run up the pitch, and can help bring those assists into the side. The only problem I have with some of the players is that, again, right-sided players, they predominantly play as, not saying they can't play on the left wing, but I think left wing was desperately needed. But it is what it is right now. Beggars can't be choosers, and we just might have to go with that. I think he's a player that I wouldn't be mad at if he came to Spurs, if I'm being totally honest.
John, they might be hearing your dulcet tones. What do you make of that little roundup we just had there? So from our understanding, Spurs keen on a forward, looking at Akliouche, but it'll be dependent on Monaco bringing someone in. And right now, just to be clear, Monaco do not have a replacement. We understand that the agent of Moussa Diaby has been in and around London in his last 24, 48 hours, holding talks with numerous clubs over a potential deadline day move. And John Duran, as you mentioned earlier, John, one you said you'd be keen to see come in, is now also an option on this deadline day. Thoughts, John, that little bit of news you've had come through?
Yeah, Diaby's agent's been in London for quite a few days. I got told that I think it was early last week. I think it was about Tuesday last week. I would take Diaby and John Duran quite happily. I think they would offer both. He's good at assisting. Diaby maybe not so great is on the goal front, but is he a step up on what we've got? 100%. And does John Duran know where the goal is? 100%. I think, Duran is just a loan. Perfect. Diaby, I'm not sure, is he 25, 26? Can't remember his age now, but he's at peak. My only concern, like Ash said, when you've been playing in the Saudi league, the pace, how long is it going to take for you to be back up to speed with the Premier League? It's a drop down, and then to suddenly pick it back up again, it isn't easy, but I'll take him all day long.
He's 26, John, by the way. Diaby, 26.
Oh, he's 26. Yeah.
26. Yeah.
I'm going to have to shoot now, Ricky.
No problem, mate.
Thanks for having me on with Ash and Billy, and to everyone out there. And I will endeavour to put back on. And come on, Spurs. Come on, Lang. Do your business.
Well, listen,
Oh, man.
as Johnny departs, and we'll hopefully see Johnny a bit later on, let's give you a roundup of where we are coming over to this hour of where we are now, at nearly 10 a.m. UK time. We'll give you a roundup of where we are in terms of what we've heard so far this morning on the grapevine. And that is the news, firstly, that as things stand, Anton Kinsky is going to remain a Tottenham Hotspur player. That's been confirmed by The Athletic. As we know, there's been subject of interest from West Ham United during the latter part of this transfer window. It felt for Tottenham to allow Kinsky to go, Spurs will need a replacement. There were concerns around the fan base that might be Hermansen coming in from West Ham United. It appears as of this moment, that's not going to materialise, and Kinsky will remain Tottenham Hotspur's backup to Guilherme Vicario as things stand. As we move up the pitch, as we attempt to do so, Kevin Danso, there is genuine concern over the nature of the injury that he's picked up. And there are concerns that for Kevin Danso, it might be a long-term injury. And therefore, with that being the case, don't rule Spurs out at looking at defenders on this January transfer window deadline day. So keep an eye on that. There'll be more prognosis on Kevin Danso. We're hoping maybe a bit later on, either on this deadline day or later in the week. But the concern around Danso is that whilst it was seen as a toe injury, it could be more of a long-term injury. Someone be surprised given the nature that right now we've got 12 senior first-team players missing from the squad as things stand. George Abbott, we understand, is on his way to Mansfield Town as of this moment in time. They're leading the way for his signature, where he will go on loan for the remainder of this season. On the subject of young players, we understand Tottenham are not currently expected to loan out Mason Melia. There's a hope that he'll start getting involved around the first team training as he closes in on recovering from a back problem that he arrived with at the football club. We've seen tentative links on this deadline day to the Barcelona player Ronald Araujo, but nothing at the moment has materialised from there. And in terms of moving further up the pitch, we understand Spurs do want to sign a forward on this January transfer window deadline day. They are still said to be keen on the Monaco player, Maguez Agalouche. However, Monaco will not allow the player to leave without a replacement. And dipping our way over to the Saudi League, we understand Spurs have got genuine interest in both Moussa Diaby. Again, we mentioned it earlier. His agent has been doing the rounds over this last 24, 48, 72 hours in London, holding numerous meetings, looking for his client to get a move. He had a move lined up to Inter Milan. That failed on the deadline day eve, and that's why he's available on this deadline day. And John Duran, one to keep an eye on, a forward well known to the Premier League, of course, of Aston Villa. We understand he is also potentially available to sign on this deadline day. And thanks already to the over nearly 10,500 that are tuned into Last Word on Spurs, locked in on deadline day, guys. If you don't mind, like, hype, subscribe to the show. That would be greatly appreciated. There's your morning roundup. Bill, will come back round to you. Bill, we said about the fact of how desperate need there is for players to come in. Do you feel at the moment you would be very surprised to see players go out? I'm probably looking at someone like Mawani, for example. Thomas Frank's made it very, very clear in the last few days, especially in his embargo presser before the game at the weekend against Man City. He's set to stay. Is there a world in which you can see Mawani leaving, Bill, if Tottenham were to get offered Duran, or would that just be, in footballing terms, suicidal to let Mawani leave the football club, given our lack of striking options right now?
Yeah, I think we can't afford to let anyone go in the entire squad, actually, because, Scarlett going out on loan. Solanke is, our only striker at the moment. I know Tell can play there, but, Thomas Frank doesn't seem to favour that option at all. He seems to always put him on the left wing. So, yeah, we can't afford to get rid of Mawani, I don't think, even if another striker comes in, just because, we're going to have midweek games coming up in the Premier League. I think Newcastle midweek game, Palace is a midweek game. Then we've got the Champions League in March to contend with as well, which will be massive for us. It's, it's pretty much our only strong hope left of the season. And so we cannot afford to let anybody's go at all. And we just need to bring some in.
Absolutely. Ash, coming around to you, asked you the same question, Ash, based on what we're hearing so far in terms of potential incomings. If Spurs were to bring in a forward, do you see a world in which Callum Mawani goes out on this deadline day, or do you think he's locked in now, regardless of any potential forward coming in for you, Ash?
Yeah, I think he's locked in. I think it's too risky with the coming off of Dominic Solanke, reoccurring injury issue in terms of his ankle. That's going to be a big worry for Spurs at the moment, and they're going to try and manage him as much as possible. They're going to be keeping a close eye on him with Richarlison out as well. You've got a potential of 2 forwards being out, and relying on 1 striker. He could obviously pick up a knock at any time. You know how Spurs are in terms of impact injuries this season. So letting him go out on loan and then not being able to get someone in on the deadline day would be just idiotic, and that would send the club into meltdown, as well as the fans. So I think the wisest situation would be to keep him, especially that we just got rid of Scarlett as well. So yeah, we've got to keep hold of Moani, even if we do bring in another forward, in my opinion.
It's quite interesting, the fact that with Mason Millia, there's a suggestion that they're hoping to have him in and around the first team. I just want to know, Bill, like you and like John, of course, Lily White Rose, he loves seeing young players come through. Would you be massively, massively surprised, Bill, if Mason Millia was to be thrown into the second half of the season, if this window remains the same, given Spurs' current attacking options and given the concerns around even Solanke that's limped off? He thinks he's going to be okay, but you look at what we've got. Richarlison being out at the moment, Kudus being out at the moment. Odebel, of course, made the bench as they did come on eventually. What's your gut feeling on Mason Millia as to whether we'll see game time for him in the second half of the season, Bill?
I think what he might be involved is first team training and might make the bench a couple of times. I'll be surprised to make him make any minutes, but if he does, that is a clear sign that they think that he's really talented, which will be exciting. I think, we've seen it with Byfield recently in the last couple of weeks. It is really exciting for fans to get these sort of young players coming through, and I think that would be a big lift for the club if that is something they see. But what I think will probably happen, I know Alistair Gold said they're keen to get him involved in first team training, and if he impresses there, then who knows. But yeah, I think it'd be exciting if it does happen, but I think it would be a better option to buy an experience for, just because it's asking a lot for an 18-year-old that's never played in England to come in and make an impact. So I think he might definitely be involved in first team training, though. We might see him in the next couple of years, but it's good. I think as fans, it's good to see young players coming through the team. We've seen the lift that it gave the stadium with Byfield coming on a couple of times in the last couple of weeks.
Agree. Just on the defensive aspect of where we are, Ash, I mean, like I say, at the moment with regards to Danso, this prognosis around his injury is unknown, but the concern is that it might be another long-term one. You look at our defence at the moment. Romero, of course, missed the game yesterday. Missed the second half yesterday. Mickey, of course, missed out on the game. You look at us defensively, there's no Ben Davies now. He's out for the remainder of the season as well. Luka Vuskovic currently out on loan. What's your gauge on that for you, Ash? Do you feel we've still got enough defensive wise, or do you have genuine concerns if Danso does turn out to be a long-term injury? We've got 12 currently senior first team players out the squad. How concerning would that be, Ash, going into the second half of the season, given how good Danso has been for Tottenham when they haven't had the likes of a Romero or Mickey available for the odd game or two? Because to be fair to Frank, he's had, let's be honest about it, Romero and Van der Ven fit for the majority of this season. What's your gauge on that for you, Ash?
Well, the way Thomas Frank is speaking, he's saying a lot of these injuries aren't like long term. So he's talking about the recent ones, I think. So when I say long term, I mean 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 3-4 weeks max. I know Mickey Van der Ven was on grass and he was touch and go. So they were kind of monitoring that. However, we are still thin, I agree. Danso sounds like an impact injury during training. So it's typical with Spurs. It's just our luck at the moment where he could get a mad injury on his toe and they don't know how long that is going to be out for. They're saying maybe 3 to 4 weeks with him. But yeah, again, it could be longer. Who knows? Good thing for Dragushin, though, is that he's going to get more minutes, because I was thinking with Danso being there, where's Dragushin going to feature? Unless we are doing this back 3 thing. But now, because of the injuries, I think we're forced to play a back 4. Yesterday, we did see Dragushin play in a back 2 with Palhinha. And to be fair to them, they did quite well in considering the circumstances, and they've never played with each other before. But we don't want that to be a regular occurrence. And we saw last season, it was Dragushin alongside Archie Gray playing at centre-back. So we have been through this type of situation before. But yeah, we don't want to rely on these type of players throughout the season in the back 2. And Romero, again, as I said before, like Mickey van der Ven, hopefully these aren't long-term injuries. They're literally could be ready for Manchester United. We see Mickey van der Ven, Romero back for those games. And then you've got Dragusin as a backup. And then hopefully that holds out until maybe, like I said, maybe 3 or 4 weeks when we haven't got too many games. If you remember, we do play Manchester United, then Newcastle, and then we've got a 10-day break until we play Arsenal, which is enough time for players to get back from their injuries. I'm not saying players will be back for Arsenal, but it just gives us a bit more respite in that particular area. Worst case scenario, we could look for some of the youngsters to be brought back from loan. I know there's no rumors about that, but worst case scenario, you could possibly bring back a Phillips back on from loan. Do you know what I mean? So we do have options there. But the issue is that you need players that are, you know, going to be of level, and it's not going to be too much of a drop off. And as I said before, Archie Gray has played there before. It's not ideal. Like you want to bring maybe in a centre back, but does that affect our long term planning? That's the thing. So if we're looking at players like, I don't know, Van Hecker, for example, he's a centre back we've been recently linked with, and that could be a summer deal. Maybe we hold off from getting a centre back in to maybe focus on those summer deals further down the line.
What's also interesting is, I mean, I just wonder someone like Palhinha, Bill, who's basically had to play always as a makeshift centre back. I thought he actually played quite well against Manchester City. What do you think the future holds for Palhinha? Because I think the argument would be with him that, to be fair, he's actually done his job in terms of what was being asked of him this season. So I suppose his future's up in the air to some degree because you feel he was very much a Thomas Frank signing. Is that one that we generally just aren't going to know what's going to happen with him until the summer? And maybe is that just dependent on whether it is Frank or somebody else that comes through the door and makes their mind up on Palhinha? Because, I mean, again, he has done his job and he's probably been one of the very few players that you can say, well, based on his remit, he's done what he was asked to do. Is that fair, Bill, on Palhinha?
Yeah, I thought he was really good yesterday. And I think, you know, he's incredible at breaking up play. Probably one of the best players I've seen at Spurs to be able to do that. And, you know, I know there are questions of his limitations, but, you know, it's putting a round peg in a square hole, isn't it? He does exactly what he's supposed to do in the system. I think he's actually looked better since he's dropped back into a centre back in a back five. I think that really suits him. I guess what he would want to avoid is what happened at Bayern Munich, where Tuchel signed him and then a more progressive manager and Company came in, and you know, Company did not favour someone quite so defensive-minded. So he would want to avoid that situation at Tottenham by, obviously, because Thomas Frank's future is still up in the air, and I think you'd have to have big doubts about whether he will be here next season. He probably will be here till summer, so you'll want to avoid that for sure. But I think at the price of 25 million, it's just an absolute no-brainer, really. I don't think, you know, I'm sure any manager can find a place for him for that kind of money. It's just a bargain in this day and age, isn't it, really, for a player of his experience and quality. So I think whoever is manager in summer, I think we'll still take him on just because it's a really good deal for us. And we showed how useful that he can be. But he will want to avoid the situation that he had at Bayern Munich, where another manager took over after a more progressive manager took over, and then he found himself out of the favour of the team.
What do you think, Ash, for you on Palhinha and his future? Do you think that's going to be very much entwined with Thomas Frank as to what happens with him? Because, like I said, Palhinha's really done his job of what's been asked of him, really, in a Tottenham shirt. And if you look at all the statistics around him, I mean, look, he's delivered based on what he was as a player and based on what you would imagine he's going to bring to a team. Is it going to be touch and go, do you think, Ash, depending on whether the club do take up that buy option come the summer?
Yeah, I think it all depends on whether Thomas Frank is here in the summer, because I think he was brought in for Thomas Frank. I think that's a player that he identified. Again, we talk about characters, we talk about the right blend, leadership, etc. And I think he was brought into the dressing room for that exactly. And he has the experience, more importantly, Premier League experience to help bring in to that midfield, because we did have a midfield of Archie Gray at one point, Lucas Bergvall and Pape Matar, who's not that young, but again, kind of veers on the edge of euphemism. So, yeah, he came in. He's a solid player. And I think the reason why he looked so well and he fitted in so well at centre-back, in my opinion, is he could see the whole pitch. And so he does what he does best, which is tackling. he can step into midfield as well, break up play and keep it simple. And I think that's why we saw the best of Palhinha on the weekend. But just in general, he's been getting goals for us as well. Set pieces, popping up late. So he's been doing a little bit more. And this season has been unfortunate because I think at one point it was him and it was Bentancur playing in the double pivot. And a lot of fans weren't happy because it was a bit too safe in possession for the two of them being playing at the same time next to each other. So what the manager opted for was to play one of them, and Bentancur was getting the nod ahead of him. And so therefore it looked like Palhinha was getting the short straw most of the time, coming on second half. He kept professional nonetheless. And since Bentancur's been out, I think Palhinha's had a chance to come in. So looking towards summer, I think now's his time where he can step up, really make his name be known and make his stay permanent if he does continue in this vein of form, in my opinion. So we know what he can bring. Can he build upon that? That is the question.
I mean, that is the key, isn't it? I mean, this is what we're going to be obviously looking at in terms of now when you come into this point, in terms of evaluating where the summer is at. It feels there's a lot of big decisions that need to be made about this squad. Is that fair? I mean, I go back to probably that time under Pochettino first around where you're looking at a lot of players thinking how much of this squad really is going to be ready to go again, potentially under another new manager. I know there's this kind of general vibe out there that some fans that are not Spurs fans feel that they just want to keep changing the manager every 5 minutes. And I think the fans have been so patient. I think we go back to what was told in the summer to us about the fact the reason for obviously changing to Thomas Frank was we wanted to compete on all four fronts. Well, here we are. You know, league-wise, we're looking behind us rather than up ahead of us. And obviously the Champions League, we've still got to play for in the second half of the season. I suppose going back 12 months now, where we are now, are you of the same mindset that you are clinging to the Champions League as being something that you can see achievable? Or is that just absolute fantasy stuff, Bill? Is it a dream world, or is Tottenham such a crazy football club where you're made to consider these things because of the nature of this football club? It sounds insane to talk about that, but I don't know. Where are you on that, Gage?
Yeah, I think it is a dream world. And I think, we might go on a good run and we might get to like a semi-final or something like that. But I think, winning the Champions League is just far too beyond us when you look at the quality of the teams that are in it. Arsenal, Bayern Munich, PSG, Barcelona, Real Madrid. I mean, it's not to say we can't win it. There is, a slight possibility that we could do something crazy, but it's not the same as last season where you're looking at the Europa 16, the 16 teams left and thinking we could really win that. And, obviously this time last year we had our path to the final mapped out and it was a pretty favourable one, and it ended up obviously transpiring as well. And we were thinking, we've got a real shot at winning that. I don't think any fan is thinking the same in the Champions League, but it might be a good run for the club. And then, but I don't think anyone would be expecting a trophy at the end of it. And I think you're really right. And, in summer does feel like a huge period for us because there's a lot of question mark over some of the more experienced talent about whether it's time to move on. People like, Vicario will be questioning, possibly Richarlison will probably be looking to move on, Bentancur possibly. And the younger, more established players, I'm sure will stay around, and particularly the new ones that we've signed. Even for people like Porro, it might just be a time where it's the end of the road for Tottenham now, because, we're probably going to see quite a lot of overhaul in summer with some of those more experienced players. I think, we've already seen links that Spurs are looking to move Vicario on in summer and replace. So it will definitely be a busy summer. And I think, the established players that we're signing, and obviously we'll be desperate to keep hold of the likes of Van de Ven and Romero. But I think there'll definitely be some big moves in summer. So it should be another interesting period of time for us, in the last, in summer. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of overhaul. But I think the good thing going into it is that it looks like now, some of the new signings like Xavi are, really starting to kick on. And I think, if we can make more signings like that, I think fans will be excited.
Just on that as well, Billy, as well, before you go,
Yep.
Change the topic. I think if we did have a good run in the Champions League, that would help. I always talk about the brand of Spurs, and it's been slowly being knocked off, finishing 17th last season, and currently we're 14th now. But if we had a good run in Europe, it would still let players, not necessarily in the Premier League, but outside it, that this is still an attractive destination where you can come and basically get that exposure. Xavi would be one of them. Obviously, he's, like you said, a knight in shining armor at the moment, and lots of players want to get behind him because he seems like he's going to be a player future, a player with a budding future at Spurs. So could we get more players of that ilk? Someone look at Xavi and think, oh, hang on, look what he's doing at Spurs. Maybe I could make the same impact, especially if we have like great nights. For example, Juventus, if we will get drawn them, maybe Kolo Muani, who scored against his former clubs, maybe he comes alive against Juventus. We saw what he did, obviously, against some of his old clubs. So, yeah, I look at players and I look at that cup competition, especially. A lot of revenue could be made there as well. It's just whether the club are going to spend that money on the players that we need to get that could take us up to the next level. I'm always thinking, what player could take us to the next level? Because I know we're 14th and I know we're at 8 points from the bottom, but equally we're still 10 points away from that European spot as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting points we make there. I mean, Bill, you talk about there the kind of changes Spurs may have to make in the summer. Does it feel like we're going to do a massive another squad overhaul? Because it feels like we have overhauled to some degree a number of areas of the squad over the course of the last 2-3 seasons. I think in Angie's, forgive me, was it first and second season? There was a lot of players that left the football club, and it feels that even though the players are leaving, the culture is something that we can't seem to ever eradicate. You know, it was so good under, you remember the Pochettino seasons 2, 3, and 4, where it just felt you were going into every week that feeling of winning. How difficult is it going to be, Bill? You know, if someone was to come back of that Pochettino ilk, for those that aren't really a fan of Poch or people that want Poch back, how easy or hard is that going to be to change the culture? Because I go back to that first half against City yesterday, and Gary Neville made a point on commentary. I know many people saw it, he was digging at Tottenham fans. I didn't even take it like that. For me, I felt he was actually just saying, look at what's happened to this football club. They've got this 60,000 plus seat stadium, you know, state of the art of everything. But look how like apathetic the fans are. It's actually gone beyond anger. It's come to a point now where fans just, they're tired. They're tired of moaning. They're tired of whinging. Just how hard is it going to be to really change the culture of this football club? And can one man do that? Or do you generally think it's going to have to be changes at board level even further of a complete new ownership if we are to re-establish what we identify as Tottenham? Because I've said this so often now that I don't really identify with the club anymore. I don't really identify with the board, some of the players. You know, that's been one of the reasons why I've been clamoring for the return of Pochettino. He's probably the last person that I can really think gave me a connection of what Tottenham was and what they were. And I know how it ended, don't get me wrong, but I don't know about many people out there, but I'm just seeking some form of a connection again with this club. Is that where you're at, Bill? Or how do you feel about that subject yourself?
Yeah, I'm kind of in two minds. My first mind is that, you know, my major worry is finishing 17th last season. You're kind of hoping that's a blip that would not be repeated, and it was just because the wild injuries in the Europa League. But now that we're sort of halfway through the season and in 14th, you're now worrying, is this just the norm for Tottenham now? Have we just descended into a decline, into like a lower half mid-table team, which would be a massive, massive worry. Like under the last 10, 15 years, we've always generally finished inside the top 6. To be this the kind of decline is happening in front of our eyes is a major worry. And then I kind of feel sometimes, well, actually, if you look at the squad, there are some really exciting young talent there. People like Odegaard, Xavi, you know, Van der Ven. We've got some really good, Udogie. We've got some really good young players that maybe under the right manager might see us get back to that sort of, you know, competing for Champions League, competing for titles level. I think the reality is somewhere in between the two is that we're going to need serious investment to get back to where we need to be. Serious investment. And I think, you know, I hate to bring them up at the moment, particularly after yesterday. But if you look at Arsenal when they were finishing 8th and then 8th and 8th, what changed it was because they spent so much money every single summer and, you know, relentlessly pursued first team players. And in answer to your main question, I don't have any faith in these owners to be able to do that because, you know, they promised it in the summer. They promised it in Vinay's statement. But I think we've already seen this January that, you know, what we do, and we haven't improved the first team. You know, Thomas Frank literally said on Friday that we're weaker going into this at the end of January than we were at the beginning. When the manager's saying that, and this was promised to be an ambitious January, then there must be serious alarm bells ringing. I think they've already shown that they can't deliver that. So I think there are some bright sparks in our squad for sure. And I think, with a bit of investment, we might be able to climb our way back up the table. But I think it's going to take serious investment into the first team. And I personally don't have any faith in these owners to do that. So I do think, we need massive change at the club if we're ever going to get back to those glory days of sort of, being back in league titles and going for trophies again.
Do you share Bill's concerns there, Ash, with regards to the ownership, or do you feel they need to be given a summer window to truly show us whether they are serious? Because the argument has always been the old age is how hard January is for a market. I think the feeling around a lot of Spurs fans, and I think like Billy touches upon it there, that all Spurs have done so far this window is try to replace the injured players, and they haven't even done that because we've had so many injuries. But it doesn't feel that we've actually gone out there and had any real proactiveness about our business. And even now on this deadline day, let's be honest about it, here we are fishing around for maybe one, maybe two players. We'll bring everybody around up in the next 5 to 6 minutes. But it does feel like, Ash, we are very much behind the tide. Is that fair? How do you see it, Ash, for you in terms of this window and potentially the summer with regards to the ownership model?
I think at the moment it's a bit of a mess, if I'm being totally honest, where you've got so many people on the board and they're not footballing people. And then you're relying on someone called Vinay he wants to essentially recreate what he did with Arteta. And between him and Langer, that's their guy. So they're literally banking on Frank. And it's tough because I feel like the board have a complete different thought process and agenda to what they have. And if they had their way, they would have sacked Frank a while back. And the problem is you've got board pulling in one direction, but then you've got the footballing so-called people pulling in a different direction. And that in itself is a conflict in interests. And you've got people that may want to push the club in a different direction. How do you back that project? Does that make sense? And then there's a separate issue where you've got the person you've tried to move out in Daniel Levy. He's trying to sell his shares to a complete different consortium where you've got a group of people, businessmen that could come into the club and they could have a complete different agenda again. So then now you've got too many cooks in a kitchen. Does that make sense? So how are we going to move forward in one direction where we need to get to the bottom of something like a January window or even a summer window moving forward? For me, it's just it's craziness. And so yeah, I'm not too sure. As before, when we had, Daniel Levy, it was just one person making all of the decisions, like literally. And that's why, like, when we want to get rid of a manager, literally, you heard it like half time, Martin sacked because he's literally the one to press the button. With this one, like, I felt like Frank was in the firing line, but that never happened quickly because there was too many voices to kind of let that action happen. And so my worry is going down further the line, there might be footballing decisions that need to happen, and everyone has to have their say and they all have to be aligned, and that's when the decision happens. So maybe that's the reason why we're seeing such sluggish movement in the January window, and that could continue in the summer as well, even though we've got all this cash, because there might be a player that we're looking for and then someone says, hang on a second, you bought said player and we don't think that player worked out. We just need to kind of screen that player before we make that decision.
Yep. It's going to be interesting. Look, let's give everybody a roundup where we are. We're approaching 10:30 a.m. UK time. So let's give everybody a roundup of where we are on this January transfer window deadline day. We'll start from the bottom of the pitch and move further up as we go. We understand as things stands that Anton Kinsky is going to remain a Tottenham Hotspur player on this January transfer window deadline day. There was interest from West Ham United, as we know, that came subject to late interest in this potential window where there was an opportunity. Spurs may have looked at Hermansen as a possible exchange deal, but it understood Spurs now have made their mind up. They want to keep Kinsky and barring any late-term events, he will remain the Spurs keeper, backup keeper, and they will not be allowing him to go out on loan to West Ham United. Now, there has also been suggestions and concerns around the injury to Kevin Danso, who, as of this moment, is expected will be assessed over the toe injury that he has sustained. There is a worry that this could actually turn out being more of a long-term problem than a short-term one. Thomas Frank did say on the back of his press conference against Man City today, he was hopeful it wasn't going to be a long injury, but a reminder, he has said that several times around a number of Spurs players that have led to them then being out longer term. So one to keep an eye on Kevin Danso, because again, he was covering for, of course, Mickey van der Ven, who missed the game against Manchester City. And also on top of that, you have to also bear in mind that we also, of course, have got Christian Romero, who missed the second half against, of course, Manchester City. But there is a suggestion that he should be okay and he shouldn't miss too many games, if any, in the run Spurs have got coming up. As we move up the pitch, sticking with some of the youngsters first, we understand that Mason Melia is going to remain a Tottenham Hotspur player on this transfer window deadline day. There has been suggestion that potentially he may have been looking for a loan move. However, as things stand at the moment, given the fact he's still nursing a back injury and Spurs' keen nature to acclimatise him to life around the training ground, life around the Spurs players, he's going to remain a Tottenham Hotspur player on this January transfer window deadline day. A player that could be heading out the door, a youngster, is George Abbott. We understand that Mansfield Town are currently leading the race for his signature, and he could well make the move there before the end of this deadline day. In terms of potential incomings, there's been a couple of tentative links. We understand Spurs are looking for a forward on this deadline day, and one to keep an eye on, again, has been a name that's propped up the last 2, 3, 4 windows. That's Agalouche, of course, of Monaco. As things stand, Monaco not keen to let him go without a replacement, despite Spurs' interest in the player. So if anything was to be done there, Monaco would have to bring in a replacement first. And then dipping our toes over in the Saudi waters, we understand Spurs hold an interest in Moussa Diaby, where they would be keen to get a deal done. However, of course, time pressing against Tottenham. We understand his agent, is in London and, of course, would potentially be able to close this deal for them if possible. John Duran, another one we understand, is potentially on the move on this deadline day. Spurs also being linked with a move for him. So, again, one to keep an eye on. And they've also been linked with the Barcelona player, Ronald Araujo, on this deadline day. So, at the moment, tentative links right now. And it's a case of seeing what Spurs will do. But, I mean, I suppose, is the good news, Bill, starting with you, the fact that, you know, it appears we are active. It doesn't appear that we're done. Would that give Spurs fans hope, or are we falsely promising the world here by even suggesting that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's good to have a little bit of hope. I think we're all dreading the Alistair Gold tweet, aren't we? Spurs understand there'll be no more business coming in the window. You know, that tweet that he always puts out, that'll be a real killer if that happened right now. So we're desperate for players, and I think fans are desperate for signings as well. I think we have to be active right up until the deadline, I'd imagine, because, you know, our playing squad is just way short at the moment. And it's good to have a couple of links. It sounds like they're trying to get a forward in and possibly a defender. And as usual, they'll probably keep us right up to the wire. But it's definitely better than the alternative of that, you know, Alistair Gold dropping that bombshell that Spurs are no longer active in the market. So, yeah, keeps us alive for a little bit at least.
Do you share Bill's optimism, Bill? Do you share Bill's optimism, Ash, that there's still, whilst there's time in the window, anything can happen? But as we know, the closer we get to that deadline, the more panic there is, the less due diligence there is to be done, the more you've got to take that gamble. Is that fair, Ash? You're making decisions that are worth a lot of money. And like we said earlier in the show, you know, that lack of due diligence at times can harm and affect clubs. Would that be the concern, Ash, as we tick towards the deadline, of the lack of time you've got to make a decision on this?
Well, the thing is, like, they would have been looking at potential deals they can get through done in January from like November, October. And some of these deals would have been looked at from the summer, of course. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we were looking at players like Semenyo and Savinho and never got over the line. And then Agalouche obviously was the next one. Diamonde obviously came up this window as well. Don't know how long that's been looked into, but again, he may not be attainable. I think Alcaluche is the one that everyone's looking at, and he was the player they were linked with, Monaco. I think I can't remember his name. I think it's Ben Seguir. They were very closely linked to him in terms of getting him on loan. Now that seems to kind of faded away, and I think they're in talks with Lazio at the moment for a guy called Nossin for a loan agreement, probably worth around 20 million. So it all depends on Monaco at the moment. If they can get a suitable replacement in, I think Spurs can move aggressively. I know the price was being an issue at the moment because Spurs would look at Alcaluche more as maybe a 35 to 40 million player, and I think Monaco value him a lot higher in terms of fee, maybe like 50 to 55 million euros. And so I think there was a bit of a disparity in terms of where they would agree with the fee, but Spurs do have the money, and in this particular window, you just have to cough up the cobblers. It is what it is. Like, you're not in a state where you can kind of negotiate, especially on deadline day. You kind of have to get these type of deals done. And then he was a player. I think the reason why they're looking at the valuation of him is because Turkey, again, he was at Lyon, and City picked him up for around 30 to 35 million. Look how he's turned out. And I think maybe Spurs are trying to evaluate him on a similar price point because they're similar ages. However, you know, Turkey was doing a little bit more than Alcaluche. I still feel like if we don't get it done, PSG, he's very much a PSG type of player, in my opinion. He's a player that would fit in there really nice. If PSG were to get rid of one of their players, I know Liverpool are interested in Barcola, for example. So if he went to Liverpool, then they would look for a player like Alcaluche to come in. So yeah, it's just, for me, Spurs have to kind of pull out their finger and really start to, you know, put the money where their mouth is in some of these players.
Agree. Like I say, it's difficult right now because you're looking at really players that are going to come in and directly impact the 11. But if I was to say to you that we're bringing in players as squad fillers, would you just disregard that? I mean, are you of the genuine feeling for you that unless they're going to directly impact the first team, absolutely no point in bringing them through the building? Because I said it in the earlier part of the show, I think the concern for a lot of fans when they look past the recent deadline days, you mentioned that one earlier around the Kulusevski-Bentancur deals, is that one similarly only a couple of seasons ago. They're both here right now, but Spurs, as we know, they were keen on Colomawani on that deadline day, didn't get the deal done. They end up with Matisse Tel with an option to buy. Spurs then took the option to buy and then have since gone back for Colomawani. So again, I'll make that point around the fact that how important is it that the players Spurs are adding to this squad in terms of today, deadline day, is genuine quality that is going to actually, I would say, challenge the 11, force their way through the 11, rather than they're just being squad fillers that really we can't really count on them, Bill. Because I think that's the concern, that when you get to this kind of 11th hour now, and we are scrapping, that suddenly it's like anything. Being in a nightclub at 2 a.m. in the morning, you know, very different to what it starts off at 10 p.m. at night. You know, your options change, your optics change. Take me away from the subject, Bill, before I get myself in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the last 2 Januaries into account, and if you look at the 2 centre-backs that we signed, you know, Dragusin, who's probably, you know, I know he did okay yesterday and he's been injured for a lot. You'd probably have to make the case that he's not been a successful signing. He's probably not been good enough at the moment. We haven't seen enough of him. And he's been poor when he has seen. But then if you take Kevin Danso, for example, a player who's not come in for the first team because we're very strong at centre-backs, but has pushed him all the way, and is when he comes on, gets a lot of minutes for Tottenham, and he's really sort of improved the level of the squad in general. So I think we need to be making those kind of, if we're not going to be making first team signings that are going to come in straight away, then we need a few Kevin Dansos that are just really ready-made players to come in and when they're relied upon and really reliable to be deputies. So I think if we do sign players that are going to be sort of squad, and I think we do have to remember that, you know, one day all these injured players are going to come back, and then we don't want to be left with, you know, a ton of players that we're unable to keep happy. So I think it's difficult to find the balance, but I think we're at a point where, because we have so many injuries, we definitely need some bodies in, and then possibly in summer, we'll look to sign, players that are going to really improve that first 11, your Xavi Simons level signings. But I think right now we're just absolutely desperate for bodies, and it would be fantastic to go out and sign, Marmoush or Savinho that were going to really come and play out left wing for us. But I think with the reality that we've got 9 hours left of deadline day, I think we're going to have to. I think that kind of sign is probably looking unlikely. So we just need some bodies in.
I mean, at this point, we are being linked with a couple of forwards. I mean, people are proposing to us Raheem Sterling. Bill, we'll start with you. Ash's face is interesting there. Raheem Sterling, Bill, is that a dangerous signing to make on this deadline day? It feels a panic given how his Chelsea career ended, how he played at Arsenal. This doesn't feel like the right kind of signing right now for us. Is that fair, Bill, would you say?
I think so. We've got,
I think Bill might have been stunned when we mentioned Raheem there.
You've got loads of wingers again, and he'll be big wages, taking up the time. And this guy has not played consecutive Premier League since February 2024, so it's not a signing that I want to make. It's just I don't think it's the right time to sign him. I think he's done. His loan at Arsenal was really poor. He's been poor at Chelsea for a while now. I don't see the upside in signing him, to be honest. I think he's probably going to look at a sort of lower level Premier League team where he can make an impact. But just for where we want to be, it's not someone I can see taking us forward. I'd rather stick with Odegaard. And to be honest, I think I'd rather have a young player like Odegaard coming through that is showing talent than paying big wages to Sterling. And he might make give experience, make a couple of appearances here and there, but this guy has not been a Premier League regular for a number of years now.
There was actually suggestions that's coming over to you on Sterling that he's actually been very good behind the scenes at Chelsea with a lot of the young players, helping them develop, offer them advice. Is the concern, like Bill said there, that if you're going to bring in Sterling, does that then suddenly block the pathway to an Odegaard, to Tell that has shown a little bit of recent uplift? And with Sterling, I suppose the concern is that how can you be guaranteed what you're going to get from him, given his most recent appearances at Arsenal and at Chelsea? And overall, I say again, when a player's come in, what is the motivation? He's very, very wealthy. Is it about just game time? I mean, Spurs, maybe you could argue, could offer him game time now because of their lack of options right this second. But does he actually, Ash, improve the squad? Would this be a panic move if it was Sterling on deadline day, given that he's a free agent? It would be a very easy deal to get done because there's no real complications. With this being the case in this particular move, they do go in for Sterling.
Yeah, the problem with wingers of a certain age is that after a while, you start to lose power. What do I mean by power? When you're with the ball, you need to create separation from your marker. And as you get older, you start to lose the degree of that. And so because he's lost the degree of power to escape from a player, you're not really going to get the best of Sterling. And I think that's the greatest worry. And even in his later stages of his career, he's trying to arrive in the box late, get on the end of things. We already had a player like that and we sold him. So it wouldn't make any sense for me to bring a Sterling in at this particular age where he did have a loan stint. As Billy's already mentioned, at Arsenal, that hasn't gone to plan. It's actually failed. And again, we spoke about Chelsea at the latter end of that career. They knew it was time to move on with him, and hence why they did the loan deal to Arsenal as they usually do. They're like best buddies, right? They're always in bed together. So Spurs coming in would definitely be a panic buy, and that is a signing that I don't think a lot of fans will get behind. So I think that's a bad PR move, in my opinion. I do understand the need for leaders and the need for players that have been there and done it, etc. But at the same time, you don't want to do it at the detriment of sacrificing the technical level of the team. And I think that Sterling, in my opinion, as good as a player as he was for Man City and even Liverpool, for Spurs, I don't think he's going to be the player that we need to kick on to help us push up the table, in my particular opinion. So that's my thoughts on Sterling, if I'm being polite.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one because there'll be people saying, "Well, look, he's a free agent. What's the gamble for 6 months?" But I suppose, Bill, the question is also, yes, he is, a free agent, but that doesn't mean because he's a free agent you just want to bring anybody in. Again, we talk about the culture at Tottenham. You don't want to add further insult to injury in terms of bringing the wrong players, Bill. I keep going back to this, listen, I'm a man that does want signings to come through the door. I want them to be the right sign. I think that's really important where we are, Bill. Thomas Frank keeps saying it's a transitional season, but would you agree that if we do bring in the wrong caliber of player, this could very much damage already a dressing room that does need, I think, a lot of overhaul come the summer, Bill?
Yeah, definitely. And I say, the squad have shown some spirit in the last couple of weeks, but I think the harmony, there's still quite big issues in terms of the player harmony. It wasn't so long ago. It was only last month that we saw players fighting the fans on the side and stuff like that. And, I think we have to do a lot of work to repair the relationship between the squad and the fans still. And Thomas Frank, it's all a bit, it's mending slightly, but it's still a bit fractured. So I think that, I'm not taking Sterling as an example because I have heard he's a really good character off the pitch and stuff like that. But it's just, we just have to be very careful with who we sign to make sure the last thing we need is to disrupt a squad that is already quite fractured and broken. And, behind the scenes, it doesn't seem to be massively harmonious at the moment. So, we have to be very, very careful. I'm not saying Sterling will make it worse or anything like that because, it is quite widely reported that he's a great character off the pitch and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But just in general, I think we need to be really careful.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And again, when we're looking at right now, players that, can come in and make a difference to Tottenham, I think it's fair to say, Bill, to stick with you. Look at the options out there right now on this deadline day. Agalushi, you feel, comes in, Bill, and he makes a difference straight away, doesn't he? We saw what he did to us in the Champions League. Is that a signing, Bill, that would give the board some leeway to some degree over what's been a difficult window?
Yeah.
Do you think that would give them a little bit of credit in the bank to get that kind of player over the line? But again, we have to make this clear, Bill. This move will be dependent on, of course, Monaco finding a replacement, which is very difficult to do on this deadline day, Bill.
Without a doubt, if they went and signed Akliouche, I think that really does genuinely show some ambition, and it's not a panic signing either because we've been after Akliouche for a while now, and this isn't signing scrambling around and trying to get a lone player from Saudi or something like that. This is signing a player that could be at Tottenham for 10 years, and a really top talent, a Champions League player, one of the best attacking players in Europe, potentially. So that would definitely not be a panic buy, and that's all that really fans are asking for. We're asking to show a bit of ambition, I think. And if they did manage to get Akliouche, and I think fans, signing Akliouche and Gallagher suddenly, you're looking at a January where, and in fairness to Tottenham, no one is really making any moves in January at all. Barely any signings across the Premier League. So suddenly, you look at Akliouche and Gallagher and thinking, well, actually, Tottenham will probably have the best January of any Premier League team. So it would completely change things if they managed to get that one over the line. It doesn't seem to be quite realistic at the moment because, I think for a transfer of that size, it takes a little bit of time rather than a panic buy on deadline day. And there seems to be two moving parts of a Monaco replacement as well. But if they did do that, then, fair play. That's all fans want, is a sign of that kind of ambition.
Agree. Ash, for you, how difficult would you see that signing of course, Akliouche on this deadline day? How difficult would that be?
Yeah, I think we said it already. It depends on them finding that loan, finding a player replacement. And if they can get that done, I think it's in Tottenham's hands, really. At the moment, it's not in Tottenham's hands because Monaco will not let him go until that replacement is there. And so with time running out, it's one of those deals where maybe they're looking at other alternatives and maybe they come back for him in the summer. And the reason why I like him so much is because when we look at wingers or we look at players in general in that forward line, we want them to kind of be able to take on their man and get us up the pitch potentially. With this type of player, this type of profile, I feel like he's a player that has a higher IQ where, yes, he can be good in tight areas. He's got ability to be really good 1v1. But what more impresses me is the IQ in terms of linking up with other players. A bit like you see with Xavi. Xavi's able to find players and create situations. You saw what he did for Solanke in terms of coming inside from that left-hand side and then dinking that ball into that dangerous area. Solanke makes a run across the box and the rest is history. I get those type of vibes from Akliouche where he's got the vision to pick out players from that right-hand side. So and he's left-footed, so potentially he could play across the front line. So he ticks so many boxes, in my opinion. But yeah, in terms of difficultiness, I just think it's all dependent on Monaco, in my opinion. We have to wait to see what they're doing, and maybe that's the reason why Spurs are looking at other targets.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, at the moment, it appears, as things stands on this window, and we're going to do a roundup again at 11 o'clock where we're going to have a changeover in cast. Actually going to stick with us. Bill, we're going to see Bill later on where hopefully we've dropped a couple of bombers on it. There is interest, just to come back to you, Bill, on these couple of Saudi players, Moussa Diaby and John Duran. Interestingly, both their agents, we understand, are now in England, London. They've been here for the last couple of days or so trying to seek moves for their clients. Do you look at both of these moves, Bill, and see them quite easy to do, given the fact if agents are here in the country, you know, Tottenham, London, you know, the training centre's not too far, and you can have medicals done from wherever now. These two moves are feasibility quite easy to do on the eye of the surface. Is that fair, Bill, to suggest that?
I think so, yeah, definitely. I think the worry is that when it's the agent trying to do a deal and not the club, it's a bit of a worry, isn't it? You'd much rather the club being going to these players first. When the agents are trying to get rid of or trying to find a move for their players, that's always a bit of a concern because, you know, what's going on behind the scenes there. But I definitely think this is probably what we're more likely to end up with rather than Akliouche, because we just don't have much time left. You know, the hours are clocking down by the time we change over. That'll be, 8 hours left in the window. So, yeah, I think this is what's more likely, and I think, you know, we've seen in the past you can if you want to, you can get a deal done right at the end of the day. So I'd definitely keep an eye on these two in particular, and I think Duran might be one to keep an eye on just because it seems like his agent is trying to offer him to anyone in the Premier League. So I guess it depends how desperate that we are.
Yeah, I think the key thing about it here, again, I go back to it, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record. You just want them to be at Tottenham for the right reasons, Ash. Is that something they've got to establish very, very quickly? You know, again, it is a World Cup year, like you've said, Ash, as well. The key will be is how much player buy-in there is. And it's gone very, very quiet on Marmoush as things stands. I mean, how unlikely, guys, do we feel this one is, Ash, to come over to you? I mean, at this point in time, what are we now? We are nearly approaching we're going to be under shortly 7 hours to the deadline. How hard, Ash, would it be to get this deal done? I just wonder, Ash, on this player, does the whole thing around the whole Man City Kane situation, the fact Tottenham never sold Kane to Man City, and you look at the Savinho talks in the summer that never materialised, had that in any way affected this particular deal, would you say, Ash?
I think so. I think the damage was done with Levy in terms of how he dealt with a few clubs. And yeah, I think any other club gets that deal done quicker or sooner. It happens, it gets pushed through. But like, it was explicitly said in the press that, you know, one of their board of directors wasn't happy, and they thought they were going to hold back this player, and they didn't want another Cole Palmer situation happening again. With Savinho, obviously they bought Marmoush, and I think maybe with Marmoush was slightly different because they bought him in from Bundesliga, and he was quite prolific. And they thought maybe he could be an alternative to help supplement or even fill in when Haaland wasn't playing. He would come in and he would give him some competition. So maybe Marmoush is thinking he wants more game time, he wants more minutes. And that's where the rumors are coming through. Whether there's any more truth to it, who knows? But Marmoush would be a great signing for Spurs. Let's not get it twisted. That's the type of player we want in. He can play off that left-hand side. I know he's not a direct left-sided winger, but in terms of goal threat, he adds something completely different. And if you do remember, at Eintracht Frankfurt, he did play alongside, and he did play with Moani. He played with Moani before Ekitike came.
Okay,
before Ekitike, him and Moani played up top, and Marmoush actually played off the left, and Moani played up top, and then eventually they played as a front two, and then eventually it was Marmoush who played up top, and then Moani obviously went off to PSG after that. But yeah, he got a lot of goals. As Johnny was saying, with Ekitike, he played in the front two, and they were, you know, Batman and Robin style. They were terrific. They were terrorizing the Europa League, the
Unbelievable.
Bundesliga. Like, yeah, I mean, on the ball, their ability to carry the ball, and they're really good in transitions. And I feel if Spurs are to move in that direction, sorry to go on a monologue,
No, you're
but
fine.
I think that those type of players, these are the type of players that would suit Spurs if we're going to be a high pressing team, slightly more direct, pushing. Like we saw what we did Man City. When we're sitting off teams, when we're in mid blocks, we're a bit passive. When we're higher up the pitch and we're trying to hit teams and win the ball high up, we look more of a threat. And I think that suits players like Marmoush. I think even Gallagher, when Gallagher's sitting back, you know, asked to do the deeper role, I don't think that suits him as much. When he's winning that ball high up, he's more aggressive, more on the front foot, more assertive, giving that license to run forward. These players like to attack. And so a player like Marmoush would help, I think, someone like Xavi. Xavi needs runners, in my opinion. And I think that's when you see the best of him, when you see players marauding forward. When we saw Gallagher running forward, getting into the box, making those dangerous runs. When we saw Solanke running in, making dynamic movement, making runs. As Johnny said already, you know, with Solanke, that injury is touch and go. It could be a serious injury. But if you've got Marmoush, at least you've got a player that can play along the front line, left side, forward. And I think with a top left-sided player, that frees up the right-hand side. And so if you've got a player like Odobert, for example, if he's starting on the right, or even with Kudos when he comes back, whoever plays on that right-hand side, it allows them to have more 1v1s and gives them more of a goal threat because they're not doubled up on. And so, yeah, that's my opinion on a player like Marmoush. If there were any inkling where he was saying, I want more game time, Spurs should pounce, cough up the money, make an offer that's literally, no, we laugh, but it's like,
no, we agree.
We need to test these clubs again, you know,
100%,
and not be shy, because certain times we get burnt through other signings, and like, oh, we don't want to make those big signings again because they haven't worked out. We just need to keep going. We've seen how Arsenal have reinvested. We've seen Chelsea; they're not afraid to kind of spend big, you know. Manchester United. I often think that Spurs are a builder club, if I'm being honest. Like we're a team that builds stars, but I think we need to be a team that mixes and matches. So we do build players, and at the same time we buy quality alongside it, and it helps players, younger players, for example, like Wilson Odobert, to come through where he's not feeling under pressure because he's got a confidence issue at the moment. We know his ability, but if you supplement him with quality, that gives the pressure. It takes the pressure off him. That's why you see other players doing well at other clubs, because the pressure's not on them because they've got so much quality around them.
Totally agree. Look, Bill, we're gonna see you later for hopefully some big breaking news in this club moving in the market. Bill, before we do let you go, what do we need to see before the end of the window for you? What would make
That's a question and a half. That's a difficult one, Bill.
Akliouche, that's the answer. Is the answer, my friend. Akliouche.
So if it was Akliouche and no more, you'd be a happy man, yeah? You'd be a happy man if Akliouche is through the door.
I still think we might be a bit short in defence, but if we got someone like Akliouche, then I'd be all for it. I just want a bit of excitement. You know, let's really show that we are going to be an ambitious club, but not confident about it, to be honest. So I'll just take anybody's in the moment. It's that, you know. I remember last time, Rick. This time last year, you made a nightclub analogy. This is about 3 a.m. in the nightclub, as you were saying last year. We're getting to that 3 a.m. period, aren't we?
Not already, surely. It's only 11 o'clock. Surely we're not at that point already. We're not going
All
to
the
the good-looking
women
already.
are gone.
Yeah, maybe it's 10:30 at night. We've still got a bit of time left.
Let's hope there's some lookers still at the bar that haven't been taken. Huh?
I can understand that applies to both men and women watching the show. We know we've got a lot of females that are also watching the show. It's both. It's both. All right, Bill. So Akliouche, Bill will be happy. Bill, thank you so much. We're going to see you as Bill will close the window as you're a superstar.
Take care,
you're a diamond. Listen, as Bill drops off there, let's give everybody a round of where we are in this window and come over to Johnny, Ash, and Bob. That will join us very, very soon on this show. So, look, round up of where we are coming into this show. And by the way, Bob is not a new transfer, son, by the way. Bob has been on the show before. We're going to have him in a couple of minutes. But where we are, right. So, bringing you around the top of the hour here. Thanks to the over 10,500, 11,000 that are with us on this show. We appreciate your support. If you can for us, Subscribe if you haven't already. That also allows you into the live chat as well to interact with the live debate. That'll be great. You can like the show. You can hype the show as well. That massively, massively helps us. Let's bring you up to date of where we are right now with Tottenham in this January transfer window. Starting from back to front, if that's even a thing these days. Kinsky, a player that we were understood that West Ham had a keen interest in between now and the end of this transfer window. He's not going anywhere. He's staying as a Tottenham Hotspur player. He will not be leaving on this deadline day. West Ham will have to look elsewhere in their pursuit of a goalkeeper. He will remain at Tottenham during this transfer window. Kevin Danso. Why am I mentioning Kevin Danso? Well, Kevin Danso at the moment, there's a concern that his injury points towards more of a long-term issue. There's a concern that he has strained ligaments linked to his foot. That is a degree of a massive concern for Tottenham. We're not going to know his prognosis, it feels, today, but that will come available to us later in the week. And that may be where you do see Spurs move for a defender on this deadline day, with, of course, the fact Romero missed the second half against Man City. Mickey van der Ven missed the game completely. You've got Jed Spence at the moment. That looks like he's going to be out for, as things stand, around a good month at the moment. So that will be the concern there. Moving up further off the pitch and going to our younger players at the moment, Mason Melia, who came in the January transfer window. Mason Melia, as things stands at the moment, is not going to be leaving the club on loan. He's going to remain at Tottenham. He's going to acclimatise to the surroundings. He's also nursing a back injury at the moment, which he needs to recover from. And therefore, as things stands, Mason Melia will remain a Tottenham Hotspur player on this January transfer window deadline day. One player who is part of our youth academy setup that may be getting a move on this deadline day is George Abbott. George Abbott, we understand, is potentially off to Mansfield Town on a deadline day deal. And you're asking in terms of incomings, well, what have we heard? We've heard there's been tentative interest in the Barcelona player Ronald Araujo. In terms of how far that interest has gone, we're unsure to date. And top of the pitch, firmly top of the pitch, it's understood Spurs still hold a strong interest in Agalouche. However, this move would be dependent on Monaco finding a replacement at what we are now entering the 11th hour. And on top of that, as things stand at the moment, Spurs also have interest in Saudi players, Moussa Diaby, whereas Johnny said earlier on the show, his agent has been in London now for a good couple of days, assessing the options. You'd imagine a deal would be able to get done because his agent is here. Tottenham, obviously, prime location in London. It would be easy to get a deal done and complete a medical. And also keep an eye on a player that Johnny also mentioned at the start of this show when he was on, John Duran, former Premier League player, played for Aston Villa, knows the Premier League, and apparently is looking for a move on this deadline day. And apparently Spurs are interested. Let's go back to the boys on that. John, lovely to be back alongside us here. We've got Ash as well for a couple of more minutes, hopefully. Johnny, your thoughts? I mean, are you still optimistic we'll get one in over the line? Where are you now as we approach nearly midday on this January transfer window deadline day?
Listen, guys, however bad it is, it could be worse. West Ham have signed Alex Diaby, right? Okay.
Disaster Diaby. Do you know what's funny, Johnny, on that point? Do you remember when I think we got linked with him, didn't we, on deadline day? I think.
Yeah, and I was going, like, you know, it was, I don't know what was worse. It was Diaby or Calvert-Lewin, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, there must have been about 20 clubs in the Premier League. Well, maybe not 20, but a large proportion of clubs. Please don't let's sign Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And now they might be looking at that thinking, well, you know what? Maybe we missed one. I don't think we missed one on Diaby, personally. But West Ham are doing business. Look,
yeah.
You know, West Ham are doing business. Fulham are doing business. Crystal Palace are doing business. We're sat in 14th position. We've got an SOS has gone out, and we're not delivering. But look, I don't think an Agalouche is realistic personally, purely to the point of view that Monaco haven't got a replacement. Yeah. But I think a Diaby or a John Duran is maybe more. The one that would really get me going, though, the one that would really say, wow, that's a signing, would be Curtis Jones. I mean, that's a real left fielder because he's in conflict or what have you. Even if it was on a loan, do you know what I mean? I just think that those are the kind of signings. So those three for me would be, as I said, John Duran, Diaby, a Curtis Jones, and obviously a centre back. Obviously, we're not going to get all of those.
No.
Forget about Raheem Sterling for now, because we can sign him if no one else signs. He's a free agent, so we can sign him after the window closes. So,
just on that point of Raheem Sterling, though, Johnny, we were speaking about this earlier actually when you was off the show.
Sorry,
that's fine. Would you see that as a potential panic buy if we're going for Raheem Sterling at this stage? Does it block the likes of Wilson Odebear, Matisse Tell's roles in the team if you're going for Sterling, who, to be honest with you, look, hasn't had a great, obviously, time at Chelsea, even worse time at Arsenal? What message does it send if you're going for Raheem Sterling now? Is there still any kind of player in there? Because it was only 3 years ago the England team was built around Raheem Sterling.
Look, I'm not condoning going to sign Raheem Sterling, okay? I'm saying if all else fails, then I don't see there's an issue with bringing him in for 3 months. He's willing to cut his wages down to around about 100 grand a week. Listen, guys, we spent 170 grand a week on Timo Werner, not once, twice. Okay, so I just figure, you know, from an experience point of view, and the fact that we're so threadbare, that he will offer us something, and some, you know, some filler, like a stocking filler. What's worrying me, though, I got to be honest with you, is how we're going to address our Champions League squad, because we can only add 3 more players. And we have lost, well, we got 12 missing. I'm not sure how many we've taken out before we can bring them back in. How many of those are going to be back before the defender-wise?
Well, it's a very, very good question. I think at the moment, what you're looking at, Spencer's looking like 4 weeks. Van der Ven, you feel, is a knock. That one should come back February-wise. But, you know,
that one before.
Well, you look at most of them. Even the Kevin Dancer one now looks really concerning. That one looks like it could be a ligament issue, and therefore that's more long-term. So the only one out of this list of 12 absentees you probably feel you're likely to get back, and again with Tottenham, you can never guarantee this, you probably would say it's Mickey Van der Ven, looking at the fact that Richarlison late February, Pedro Porro late February as things stands. Everyone else is more longer term, John. So that's a massive concern there. Massive concern.
Yeah. So it's a massive concern. And so balancing the Champions League squad and who we're going to add in, as I said, you can only add 3. So you would think for sure Conor Gallagher's going to get added. I mean, the way things are going, it could be Basuma and whoever we're signing.
But just on Basuma, John, you mentioned a good point on Basuma. How surprised are you, or maybe not surprised, the fact that here we're on deadline day, there was reports of Turkish officials being flown over to meet his representatives over a deal, and as things stands at the moment, Basuma is going to remain a Tottenham player, not a single link so far to an exit. Do you think, as things stands, Basuma is going to stay at Tottenham? Are you surprised by the lack of links, John?
Well, listen, I think we have an option to extend his contract. Now, the thing is here, watching his first 20 minutes in a Spurs shirt on Sunday, I thought, you know, just get him out the club. But I think maybe he had a couple of balloons at half time, and he certainly improved a bit in the second half, although he was taken off. For me, we can't afford to let him go. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, but right now, it's who have we got fit soldiers to go and fight the battle?
No, you're right.
And there aren't many. There aren't many.
Right. It's a big, big concern. Ash, I want to bring you in. Then we are going to go to Bob. Bob, lovely to have you on the show here. Ash, we come to that point, like we're saying now, it's more the concern of, depending on who we bring in, are they the right profile fit for the football club? I've been saying about it a lot this morning. Yes, I want signings to come in, but it's really, really important. That's what you've said many times already on this show. You're bringing in the right kind of players that are going to make the right kind of impact at the football club, because otherwise you're bringing the wrong kind of character. You add to what already feels like there might be some problem players behind the scenes that, again, whether it's Frank or the next manager, they've got to deal with Ash, haven't they? That's the big concern here.
I think that's why we brought in the likes of Conor Gallagher. He's a player that I've heard a lot about, especially from Chelsea fans. He's a player that travels well, meaning he's a good character.
Yeah.
If you leave him on the bench, he's not going to moan. He's not going to complain. He's going to go in. I saw an interview with him, actually, and he said that he went into the dressing room. Obviously, he's not been in the mix, but he was coming in to give his point of view and just give a different perspective and help the lads on as well. So you kind of need one or two characters that are slightly more of a different mindset that can help change the morale when things are going not for you, essentially, when they're going against the grain. So you kind of need one or two characters, but at the same time, you do need one or two players that are they're going to lift the club. They're going to have enough technical level where you can depend on them, and they're going to want to fight for the club. They're going to want to fight for themselves. They back themselves, and they want to be in the club. They want to. I think that's why Matthias Tell is quite disappointed that he's not getting more minutes in the position that he feels he can perform in. And he's a player, and talk in terms of mentality, he was fighting with the fans. He's a player that he backs himself, and you don't want a player that doesn't back themselves, that doesn't have the confidence and thinks they should be there. And the problem is that could disrupt the changing room, because they're saying, look, Gaffer, you need to play me. Why are you not playing me? And then all of a sudden they're unhappy, and that kind of adds to the dressing room. For example, if Johnny mentioned Curtis Jones, if he comes into the dressing room, I guarantee you he's leaving Liverpool to become number one. He wants to be the main player, and he wants to play in a position where he wants to play. So I would love Curtis Jones, by the way, but I reckon he would want to start every game. He's not leaving Liverpool to be on the bench, to come to Spurs to be on the bench. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that mean then all of a sudden you don't go for Curtis Jones? Hell no, you definitely go for Curtis Jones, because he could be the difference where he creates chances for us, he scores goals for us, he could bring out the best in other players in the front line.
Yeah,
technically he's a level above a lot of our midfielders, in my opinion. So yeah, you would definitely get him in the squad. But yeah, Ricky, it's a difficult one because it's so late in the window.
Yeah.
And everything now looks like a panic buy. It does, because it's been left. But it depends on your perception. Back in the day, we used to love it. A little surprise. I remember.
Yeah, Van der Vaart, of course.
Yeah, of course. So, like, let's hope it's that type of euphoria right now.
Yep.
Understandably, because of past windows, we're not quite trusting the process. Where we've got a lot of skepticism around of what's going on now. So yeah, let's hope there's going to be some more links as the hours tick on.
Totally agree. Bob, lovely to have you join us on the show here. Really, really pleasure to have you on the show. Bob, you join us on a deadline day where obviously fans are hoping, they're buoyant of potentially maybe one, maybe two coming through the door. We'll have a wider conversation around Spurs with you at the moment, but coming into the deadline day, Bob, what are you hoping Spurs can achieve come the deadline day coming to a close?
First of all, Ricky, great to be back. Haven't been on in a while, so it's always good to be on. Yeah, I think kind of to echo what the guys been saying and Billy was saying the last hour or two, I think Akiush is kind of everyone's go-to number one choice. And then we need cover at the back, considering the Danso injury, which has come out of nowhere. And then Van de Ven, even though he stayed pretty fit this season, there's always an injury around the corner. We're absolutely down. And in Harry Redknapp's terms, we're down to the bare bones at the back. So I think we need a centre half. Wouldn't be surprised if we pulled out almost like a Longley type signing today. Somebody on loan from Barcelona or whatnot, who maybe is a starter for them and just provides a bit of cover for us in the short term. So yeah, I think that's bare minimum. I think we get Akiush done. Look, why do I think I've heard nothing. I just have a feeling, like most football fans, I just think
you got a feeling, Bob. You got a feeling there will be a big one. You think that would lift the fans? Is that what you feel?
I think they have to. I think the Lewis family have to. Right. We've been told there's this 100 million, this mystery 100 million. We signed Gallagher, fair enough, but in my opinion, we signed him with the money from Johnson. So where's this net 100 million that we're looking at? So I think that there's certainly money there. Also, I don't understand why they're announcing the 100 million. Does that not make it tougher for you when you're going buying players that they know that you have 100 million in your back pocket?
Totally agree, Bob. Very bizarre. Very bizarre.
At the end of the day, it's not footballing people running the football club. I know Levy said, what was it? You might one day look back and regret him leaving, or careful what you wish for effectively. I'm not saying I'm going that far, but at least Levy knew how to go about it when it came to getting, I'm not saying getting a deal done, but deal with other clubs. And, you know, through osmosis, he picked up a bit about football over the 20, 25 years he was there.
Yeah.
So look, Ricky, I'm prepared to give this board maybe this window plus the next window. After that, I will turn. I'm already starting to turn a bit, but I'm prepared to give them a little bit of time. But they do need to get something out, and Akiyusha would probably get a little bit extra time with myself and other Spurs fans.
Bob, just to ask, sorry, Chris, I was just going to ask Bob, what sort of madness does a board turn around and say, just as a transfer window is about to open, that you're prepared to up your wage structure and pay more money? I mean, any player I was going to ask for 80 grand a week, but now I've just read that it's 100 grand a week. I mean, how much do you think that making that crazy statement in the midst of a transfer window has affected the ability to sign some of these players who maybe have upped their demands, as we are desperate as well?
But Johnny, it's like they've read what the fans want, isn't it? Like, oh, what do the fans want? The fans want us to spend more money. How are we going to get the fans on side? Perfect. We're going to just announce we're going to spend more money on, on players, on wages, without actually thinking. Whereas, as you said, not to big Levy up, but at all, just to really caveat that. But that wouldn't have been happening with him if he did 100%. Have extra money up his sleeve. He wouldn't be telling the world about it. He wouldn't be telling every player, every agent. We know what these agents are like these days. We see it in our own club. Agents trying to get certain players out and bigger moves and whatnot. And it's going to be the exact same now on the other foot. They're just going to be, agent fees, whatnot. Yeah, here we go. I got a cut of salary. They're just going to be pushing. Agents are running football transfers these days more than anyone.
It's very interesting, Bob, you bring this up. I mean, we've been speaking about it a lot this morning, and I know Ash and Jay were a bit pushed for time, so I was going to come to both of you before we need to go. Jay, I'll come to you on this point firstly. We spoke a lot about the board on this show already. Bob's open with the board and the kind of intentions. I mean, you made a very interesting point there, Jay, that it's weird. I don't want to be a hypocrite here because we've all asked for more communication from board level. We get the communication, but it comes mid-transfer window. And also it shouldn't be, obviously, also forgotten, it came on the eve of a protest being planned by Change for Tottenham. Again, make of that what you will in terms of the timing around that. But I have to agree with you, Johnny, what you said there. I find it absolutely incredulous, really, that we were talking about upping the wage structure, spending money during this window. And with all due respect, since that statement has dropped, we've not done anything. So even if we had done something, you say, okay, well, look, fair enough, they've stuck to their word. But at the moment, we've done nothing. We've seen the injury list get bigger and bigger and bigger for Thomas Frank. We've obviously seen us in the space the last couple of months go out the League Cup, out the FA Cup, dropped to 14th in the Premier League table. Look, barring the fact that, at the moment, it appears there's 3 worse teams than us. Tottenham looks like aren't going to get relegated. But like we said, for a second season in a row, whether you like Ange, you dislike Ange, whether you like Frank, you dislike Frank, they've done nothing to help either of them, Johnny. They're just set up for failure.
Listen, look, many fans view them as a wolf in sheep's clothing. And they went out of their way to dispel those perceptions. And I thought, you know what? I'll see if I can take it for face value. They made these big, ambitious comments. And then we saw the same, but just before the protest. But listen, they made a rob for their own back. I mean, Billy, all of us, all fans have demanded we show more ambition, we spend more money, we up the wage structure. But surely common sense tells you to say it once the window is closed. You got your signing. Guys, we mean business. Look, we signed this guy. We're paying more money. We're doing X, Y, and Z. You tell the story after the event, not before the event, right? Why not go to a movie and tell everyone the entire script before they go to see it, right, and ruin it, right? No, look, for me, it's utter madness, and it's max of desperation, really. And what we're doing is desperation, because we should not be behind the likes of Fulham and Forest and West Ham and Palace in signing players. Why are they more advanced than us? I mean, Crystal Palace have signed one of the best directors of football out there in Dougie Freeman. And whilst I don't agree with their signings at all, as spending 85 million on Strand Larson and Brennan Johnson, they're active. They're active. What has Johan Lang been doing? How many phone calls has he been making to players and they're going, no, sorry. You know, look, we're not an attractive proposition anymore, like we were in 2019. We lost the opportunity, and now we face the situation where we're not dining at the first sitting. And, you know, you have to make a plea. You have to be a salesman. What story are you selling? What dream are you selling to get them to the club?
Is that the problem, though, John? You know, from what we're hearing, is that the biggest problem that you've just said there? That it feels like with Johan, that selling power, that almost persuasive nature, it feels like he's very good when it comes around kind of talking to families about trying to bring players in, the likes of a Lucas Bergvall. And it's something I want to touch on with Ashos also before he goes, that when you're trying to convince players to come in of a more higher profile, Johnny, it appears that he's not been able to do that so far during his time at Tottenham. And let's be honest about it, since he's left Aston Villa's recruitment in terms of where they've gone, the league has only gone up. And with all due respect to Tottenham, they found it very hard, it feels, to convince real, genuine top players to come here. I
mean, listen, look, I'll be honest with you. I've met them both, and Fabio is just like an infectious character. I remember him on the bench, you know, for Conte when he was going mad. I thought he was the man. I said, "Who's that guy?" When I think it was second game in or something at our ground, and he's jumping up and screaming and like unbelievable. Never seen a director of football do this. But he has a presence about him. You know, he's a like crafty character. And Johan, I saw him at Bournemouth, and he just ghosted past me. He doesn't have a presence. He's tall, but he doesn't have that aura around him. And I think in this game, you need to be a salesman. You need to sell someone a story. What is your USP? What is your story that's greater than the other stories of the other clubs out there who are also selling their story? And not only are they selling their story, in most situations, they're paying me more money. There lies the problem.
I think what's also interesting, Ash, to bring into the conversation, again, I have to always caveat this and say, this is not me saying I want Ange Postecoglou back, but I think what's very interesting is obviously a lot of players that came through under Ange, the one thing that kept being reiterated to them is, I want to bring you here to win trophies. I want you to be part of a team that's going to do something special at Tottenham. I want to put your name engraved on the wall here. A lot of the legends of this football club. It feels like that almost rhetoric has now gone with Ange departing. And again, some will say that's for better. Some will say that's for worse. But it felt with Ange there was a clear vision. We want to win something here. I think we're all struggling to understand what the clear message is from Tottenham. Going back to Johnny's point right now, what is our USP? What are players coming for to genuinely believe they can achieve at Tottenham? Yes, you're walking into a project. Yes, you're walking into a transitional season. But right now, there's a divide on the board. There's a divide on the manager. There's a divide on many, many players of this squad. So right now, Ash, back to what Johnny just said there, how difficult a job, even the fact that whatever you think about Johan Lang, has he got right now convincing players to come when just so much around the club, the fan base is quite simply, and the manager, up in the air, Ash?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to be smart and look at the unique selling points that we've had before. And that is outside of the Premier League. I'm not talking about players inside the Premier League, outside the Premier League. So you can say to them, number one, you're coming to the most competitive league in the world, the most watched Premier League as well. Then you're going to talk about the stadium, of course. You have to say it's a magnificent stadium. You're going to have to talk about the facilities. And then you have to talk about London waiting in terms of, like, you're going to be going to an attractive city where, and even to be fair, outside of London, when you're talking to players, maybe up from north, you can say, look, you're going to be living in London in luxury. Those are the type of things you have to sell to the player to make Tottenham attractive. And then talk about history in terms of the size of the club, the heritage, etc. You're walking into a 60,000 seater stadium when you're playing out. Most players want to play in front of packed stadiums, full of energy, etc., etc. I know we haven't been full of energy of late, but in general, that's what you'll be selling to a player. And then where he fits as well, because you could talk about, lifestyle. You could talk about the club. You could talk about Premier League, but you want to kind of sell a vision. Say, I want you to play in this position, and I can see you transforming Spurs if you were to play in this particular area. So that will be the sporting director's job to convince these players that they do have a place in the squad, and then also wages, money. So money talks, let's face it. And there's been a lot of times when I'm like, how have Newcastle signed that player? How have Aston Villa signed that player when they were below us? And I was like, we should be going for these type of players. What did they sell? Because they're not in London. Do you know what I'm saying? Aston Villa, their stadium's like, 40,000 seater stadium. What are they selling? How are they getting players over the line? Do you know what I mean? It's only recently they're going up the table. They're finishing in that kind of Champions League, Europa kind of spots. So we gotta have that same type of ambition when we're looking for players, when we're trying to sell projects. We gotta say to them there, you know what? Okay, we haven't had a great season and things aren't looking up at the moment, but we're looking to get back at the top. We're looking to be dining with the elite. We do have the money. We are going to be back in this club. You're going to be playing with top players. Similar to when Man City first came in as well. Like Man City they came with Mark Hughes and they started buying players slowly. Then Sven-Goran Eriksson came in. They started adding to that. And so Spurs have to come with that kind of remit. Whether we get the players that we want at the moment, that's going to be up for debate. But we could definitely sell a vision to some of these players. It's not impossible, in my opinion.
And Bob, coming around to you because Bob started this conversation. I'm glad Bob did start the conversation, just in terms of where we are hierarchy-wise, and your feeling around the fact you're going to give them until the summer before you make your mind up. Bob, we said it about there. I mean, how crazy was that for you about the timing of that statement? Because I know, again, you've been someone like me that's wanted there to be, clarification, almost some understanding in terms of what the future looks like for Tottenham. But would you have done as all of us, Bob? It came mid-window, and since then we've done nothing to this point. And if anything, the squad is worse. And like we said, we at the moment have got 12 senior players out right now. Where are you on that, Bob, in terms of the timing of the communication? Yes, we all want communication, don't get me wrong, and I don't want to be a hypocrite to say they shouldn't have spoken at all, but is the timing the biggest problem here, Bob, for a lot of people?
But it's like anything at the moment. They're panicking. They're panicking about who the manager is, whether they should sack and bring in interim in. They're panicking about there's obviously change for Tottenham. We're organising a protest. They panicked. They released a statement. Like footballing, if there's footballing people on the board, they wouldn't be panicking like that. If they just released a statement said, look, judges in this window will give you a full update on the standings of the club after the window, when the window shuts. I think most fans would have been happy with that. It would have held people up for 2 weeks to make a judgment. But they panicked and they released a statement. It's classic. Like we were talking there, like in the summer, we had the chance to kick on. We got Champions League football. Manchester United didn't. We could have kicked on, but no, they were the ones who doubled down and went bigger in the window. Then 2022, we beat Arsenal's 4th position. We didn't kick on then. 2019, we didn't kick on after the Champions League. It's just rinse, repeat, making the same mistakes time and time again. And then we're set back a couple of seasons. Everyone else catches up or overtakes us. Other clubs like Bournemouth, Brighton, and so on, they're all overtaking us when it comes to windows. And like Ricky, I'm overly positive about Spurs.
I know you are.
I'm not somebody who's toxic about Spurs or who call for a manager to be sacked. It's all changed. This season, I'm sick of it. They pull you back in with a good second half against City. Look, that's football. It's always going to happen. But the time, everything is just all over the place at the moment. There's just no cohesion. It's just panic after panic after panic. They don't know what they're doing. They're changing their mind. Apparently, the board are split on certain decisions. They're arguing. It's all over the place. And it just comes back to not being able to kick on when we should have kicked on. In the summer, act like a big club. We're just won the Europa League. We're in the Champions League. Yeah, fair enough. We finished 17th last season. Go put 100 million on the table for Adam Morton. Like upgrade where we need to upgrade. We brought Javi Simmons in. I think he's quality. I'm delighted with that. But let's back it up. Do what Arsenal did. They just it comes down. It's like losing weight. If you want to lose weight, it's nothing fancy. There's all these fad diets out there. You do one or the other. They all come in and out. You exercise more, you eat less, you'll lose weight. It's easy as that.
Mhm.
Back a manager summer after summer, like Arsenal done down the road, and you'll see results. And look where they are at the moment. And that's what's making it even worse for us at the moment. That's what's making it more toxic.
Totally agree. Yeah, I listen, Bob, I totally agree. I think it doesn't help, obviously, in the fact even this deadline day, who they're being linked with. And I mean, just on that point there, I know, Jay, you've got to shoot in a second. I want to ask you, and obviously ask Ash as well. Jay, what are you hopeful is going to happen between now and the deadline? What would make you feel excited about approaching the second half of the season, Premier League, Champions League to come? What gets you at least back remotely looking forward to the second half of the season? And coming back and doing more last word on Spurs and more links and more Spurs fine.
Listen, look, I'll be honest with you, right? Curtis Jones gets the juices flowing for me. It's like a proper signing. That's a proper signing. Diaby is an opportunity because, Inter Milan's messing around again exactly like they did with Ademola Lookman. That I always was, thinking that's not going to go through. Mateta still could fall apart with AC Milan checking on his knee. But look, realistically, Duran and Diaby, one on loan and maybe a Diaby for a reasonable price are reasonable acquisitions. I'm expecting a signing and a loan with an option.
So let's just say we're approaching 11:30 a.m. UK time, Johnny. You think we can get 2 done? You still think we get 2 done?
Well, no, I think. Well, I'm more thinking the second one because we got no centre backs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going down like flies. Look, the difference here between clubs is today Arsenal thankfully had a bit of bad news that Mikel Merino is out for the rest of the season, but it's not going to affect them because at the end of the day, it's not devastating news because they've got another 5 quality midfielders, if not more, to fill that void. And we saw, we are top of the league when it comes to injuries. We're over 1,000 days, and Arsenal are bottom of the league. So what is it that they're doing that we aren't? Well, both from a medical point of view, from a recruitment point of view, and from a spend point of view, and from a ball point of view, we are in the mud, and it pains me immensely to be doing this. And let's be honest, it's magnified tenfold when we look at what's going on at the other side of the sound. I still wanted us to win yesterday. Sorry.
Of course. Yeah,
I wanted us to win. I didn't understand the people who didn't. I understand the sentiment. No one wants Arsenal to see Arsenal win the title. But in my mind, I wanted us to get points off of them and Arsenal. So listen, I come in hope. I pray that we do something. Ricky, thanks very much for having me on.
Pleasure.
By the time I take off, which is about 2-ish, by the time I land, it'll all be over. And I'll be looking at my phone. I'll be going, oh, you're kidding. But listen, expect Palhinha to be wheeled out tomorrow as our marquee signing of the window. That wouldn't be any surprise whatsoever. Thanks very much for having me on,
mate.
Bob, Ash. Have a good one. Everyone else in the chat, come on, you Spurs.
John, you've been a star, mate. Safe flight, Diamond. Ash, let's come over to you, Ash. I know we kept Ash longer than planned. Poor Ash. He walks into the last one of Spurs. He never gets out there on time. He never does. We don't start on time. He doesn't leave on time. Ash, come over to you, mate, in terms of we'll go back to Bob. For you, Ash, I've asked this question in the earlier part of the show. We're coming to the point now where we're coming to 7.5 hours to go of this window. We spoke about how harder it gets to get deals done when you leave it later and later. Ash, is your optimism getting less and less as the time ticks by?
Yeah, I mean, all right, look, my expectation is that we do nothing, if I'm being totally honest.
Is that so? Have you already accepted that, Ash? For you,
yeah, but
you've already accepted that. You've accepted that.
I've accepted that. And even if we do get someone in, I think we need a goal threat. I think that's what's missing inside that front line.
Yep.
And I can't see any genuine goal threats that we're linked with that are on form, in my opinion. There's players that have hit you know, moments of quality. There's been moments where they've, you know, turned up. Look, Al-Kalouche, as much as I like him, as much as I think he's a top player, is he a goal threat? Has he fallen off a bit this season? In my opinion, yes, compared to last. That's just my personal opinion.
Yep.
Duran, I could say the same about him. In the Saudi league, is he pulling up any trees? When he was at Villa, was he arrogant? Was he having fights with Unai Emery, like on the sidelines, on the pitch?
How much does that worry you? I mean, I ask you how much, but how much does that worry you? But what you're saying there, just for context, you're saying, listen, it's deadline day, less than 7.5 hours to go. You've mentioned John Duran. He has fallen out of Unai Emery. You're saying there, online, you know, squabbles on the touchline. Is that really something we should even be entertaining at this 11th hour, given the fact, yes, we need to, don't get me wrong, forward, but how I keep going back to this, Ash, how dangerous is it? And is it worth that gamble, Ash? And that'll be what a lot of people will be thinking right now. Yes, we need forwards. Yes, we want signings, but how important is it? I go back to this, Ash. It's the right profile. It's the right character, because already you feel that in that dressing room, quite worryingly, there might be players that aren't the right fit for this football club. Are we adding insult to injury, Ash, by adding to it further players that maybe aren't the right fit, Ash, for you gut feeling on that? You mentioned John Duran, Ash, and we'll go to Bob on that as well.
It's crazy because obviously we were linked to Moani, right? When we got Tel, and it was like, we got Tel because we never got Moani. Moani went to Juventus and it worked out. He's come to Spurs, and as much as the profile looks like the right player for Spurs, he's got all the right attributes. For whatever reason, it looks like he doesn't want to be here. So who's to say you get a Duran that comes here and he's not here for the right reasons, and he starts kicking off when he doesn't get the game time that he thinks he deserves, because he's not going to play out left wing. He's not going to play out right wing. He wants to start. He wants to be the main man. So again, it comes back to that earlier point I was making in that dressing room. Is he kicking off with Tel now kicking off? Because remember, Tel thinks he's a striker, doesn't want to play left wing. So he said, Frank saying to him, look, I know I didn't put you in that Champions League squad, but like, stay. I don't want you to leave. The club have decided they didn't want him to leave. Like, so does it make sense? I don't know if it really makes sense. I'm being honest. I personally think we need a left winger or a left inside forward, someone that has more of a goal threat. We're not going to get that. And that's the reason why I'm like, I just don't see it. But look, if you're going to add creativity, Al-Kalouche is the guy, and I'll be surprised if we get that out. If we get that one over the line, and I'll be surprised if we get a Curtis Jones over the line. I'll be very surprised if we get a Marmoush or even a player that we haven't heard about. That's just my personal opinion.
Given the timing now, Ash.
Given the time that we're in, and the circumstance where we find ourselves at the moment, and you could look at that as a positive or a negative. You take it how you want, guys. I'm just openly speaking my thoughts. I'm just being honest. But yeah, that's how I'm looking at this particular transfer window. With so many injuries, you would have thought the club would have moved a bit quicker and a bit more aggressive. We're Man City. I know we're not Man City. I know we're not. But when they were outside of that top four and it looked like they weren't going to be involved in that title talk, they were moving so aggressive. And I just wanted to see some intent, you know, and the fact that we're not really linked with any players of note of worth just tells me that they haven't been doing their job, man, personally. And I do understand these transfers take months of planning, etc., etc.
They've had, but actually, the argument would be they've had time, haven't they? I mean, I'll come to Bob in a second on that. They've actually, they can't say they've not had time. They've had 4 to 5 months to plan for this window, Ash. I know, conscious of time, I know you've got to go, but just on that point, I mean, do you think actually the disruption of Paratigi's exit, let's be honest about it, let's be clear, 3 deals have been done for Fiorentina this window, okay? Who's been doing those deals? He's going there. So who's been doing those deals, Ash? How much has that been a massive disruption on that point?
Yeah, I mean, look how quickly he's done them as well. Like, he hasn't even been in the door, nothing but 2 seconds. And he's able to get those. And like, we were meant to have 2 directors of football, imagine. And we can't get, we can only get 1 senior player in and 1 kind of prospect player in from Brazil. He needs time to adapt. So do you even call that a signing? Do you know what I mean? I know he was in the first team squad, but he didn't see any minutes. So is he going to help us and improve like in this immediate, future? We need desperately players to help put the squad on. It's not like we're in a healthy position in the league where we want to be fighting on all fronts, but like which they told us, it just looks really bad. And I'm going to say it again, it's the PR around it, it doesn't come across as genuine. It feels like they're saying things for the sake of things. I would prefer them to be stone dead silent and then just, shut us up by signing players rather than talking. When you talk, and you start writing essays and you putting up these statements, you're only going to put yourself in trouble, because now it looks like you're not backing your talk. And now we don't believe you, whatever you do, past the hour of 7 p.m. if you don't get those quality signings in, knowing that you've had 100 million sitting there and the profiles that we needed to address in this window hasn't been, served up. So that's what I want to say, bro. But big up,
Ash,
man.
You've been a star. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. The superb Ash over at Spurs Kings TV. Make sure you go and check him out. Ash, thank you. We're going to go back round to Bob now. Like I say, Bob, been a pleasure having you on the show as well. We're going to give an update where we are at 12 o'clock, a general update. But Bob, you mentioned it earlier there about your concern around what's been said by the board, the communication of it. What's your hopes, Bob, for this second half of the season now? Like, to put it in perspective, look, Premier League-wise, we're sitting now, what are we? We're 14th in the Premier League, 24 games played, 29 points. We are currently, as things stands, we're 9 clear of West Ham. If you include the goal difference with that, you'd probably say it's 10. We're currently, you look at Liverpool at the moment that are sitting in the top 6, which, as things stands, will get you European football. It may go down to Brentford in 7th. So we're currently, as things stands, we're 10 points off 6th place Liverpool. I'll go back to that point, Bob. What is the plan now? You say to a player that's going to come in for X amount of months to come in. What's the ambition for them? Is it purely, Bob, just the World Cup now, purely for the players now to get game time? Is that what they're looking at rather than Tottenham trying to sell themselves in terms of where they are right now? Given, as you said as well, the uncertainty over Thomas Frank's position, given the uncertainty over Tottenham's league position in general, what are you gauges of a player's mindset at this point now, less than 7.5 hours to go, of why they're coming to Tottenham this window, Bob?
I think if I knew the answer to that, maybe I'd be director of football there, Ricky. It's a tough one to tell, isn't it? No, look, at the end of the day, look, Spurs are a huge club. We're in London. I know people don't like people harping on about the stadium. Probably the best stadium in Europe. Training ground and all that kind of infrastructure is there and ready to go. We're a club that's ready to kick on. We have a lot of the right stuff in place. And I think, to be honest, if you look at the 11, I know here we are asking for extra signs because we need them. I don't think our 11 is that far away. And again, this comes back to me, as I was saying, being overly optimistic at times. But I think we're literally 3 good players short of being right up there. Like, if you look again, and I don't like these, you see people saying, oh, what if we bought X, Y, and Z player? But even with the players we have there, you have the squad up there. Like, Vuskovic could be back next season. That could be a back 3 of Vuskovic, Romero, and Van de Ven. There's not much of an upgrade there. Now, obviously, hoping we keep everybody, because with those 2 boys, you just don't know. We have 2 wing backs who are wing backs, in Paro and Udogie. You could have a midfield, Bergvall and Gallagher. I would say, for my test, that work in a 3-4-3. And then your front 3, you could have Kudus one side or Kulusevski slanking through the middle and a left winger. Maybe Diaby playing left. I've just thought of that there off the top of my head in 5 minutes. Like, there's a good team there, which on paper, and I know football isn't played in paper, but football is played. If you set up a team, we're seeing it at Manchester United now. If you set up a team in a formation that works for the squad that's there, and if you play the way the squad should play, you can see yourself improving really, really quickly. Like, what I know you had the table up there. I think you said 10 points. It's probably about 7 points off 7th spot, is it?
Possibly if it drops that far, Bob. It depends if it drops that far, doesn't it, I suppose? But, I mean, you're right. Probably, based on the coefficients at the moment, Bob, you're right. It may stretch to 7th, which is currently where Brentford are. Of
even
course, Thomas
even
Frank's
at 7th, Ricky, even if we finish 7th, it's not the worst season. I think a lot of people, when they were, started the season, said, you know what, if we can finish 6th or 7th, based on finish 17th last season, they probably would have taken it. Now, I think the main problem is that what's gone with it. This turgid football, sitting back, not attacking, not playing the Tottenham way. And that Tottenham way, fair enough, people will laugh at Spurs fans saying that. But there is a way we go about it at our club. You don't go about it 58 minutes into a game against Brentford, wasting time, having your keeper booked 10 minutes later for wasting time. You don't go away to Arsenal and sit back and try to nick a goal, slow down play in the first half to try to nick a goal. You don't sit off Chelsea when you're playing at home. You don't lose to West Ham at home. There's just so much wrong this season. And my issue with Thomas Frank isn't he seems a very good man, and I don't like calling him to be sacked. I feel toxic in doing it, but it's how he's going about it. He's just not helping himself. And you could say, the Ange thing, and people saying that like Ange. I would in comparison. This time last season, did I think it was the right time for Ange to go in the summer? I probably did. But at least with Ange, we finished 17th, going playing football. We're having the exact same season as we are this season, except we were playing decent football last season. We were attacking, we were open. But it was the Tottenham way. He got the club. He got what the club was about. He didn't downplay it. Frank is all about just trying to protect himself, saying, "Oh, well, they finished 17th last season, so anything else is a bonus." Ange wouldn't have that. Like the first thing Ange said was, he got laughed at for saying, "We're not here to finish 5th. We're here to win the league." People laughed at him, but at least he got the ambition of the fans. He got how big a club it was. Whereas right now it feels like Thomas Frank is just dragging us to a level rather than stepping up to our level. And look, as I said, I don't like being negative. I didn't want to turn this into me having to go with Thomas Frank. And look, here I am. We're here to talk about transfers, but look, there's not much happening on that side. That side of things, Ricky. So what's there to sell? And this is kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier on about not kicking on when we could have kicked on. We had a project to sell at the start of the summer, and we probably were a signing or two light in the summer. And I'm going to use Adam Wharton, and people are going to think I'm mad in saying that because, why would he ever come to us? Yeah, why would he ever come to us now? But if we'd act like a big club in the summer and 100 million on the table for him early on in the window, why wouldn't he come to us then? But I can tell you why he wouldn't come to us now, because there's not much to come to now. We don't know who the manager's going to be in 6 months. We're not playing good football. We have fans who've turned on the players. We have players who've turned on the fans. And then what you were saying to Ash there about bringing potential players who maybe have attitude problems. We have to be so careful now in who we bring in. We don't have the luxury of being able to take a gamble on somebody with bad attitude, because everything seems so toxic at the moment. You put a player who can be a little bit toxic on that, and it's just going to multiply it again. And again, bringing it back to everyday life, because I've never worked in the football industry. If you're not liking your job, and you have somebody come in who's a bit toxic and starts to get in your ear, you know what, you're right, the place is a bit of a mess, you're right about it. That just grows and grows and grows, and then before you know it, you've got a new job, you've handed your notice in, you've left something. And I know football isn't as relevant to real life. It's completely different.
Bob, just on Adam Wharton, you made a really good point about Adam Wharton, Bob. I mean, you look at him as a profile of player, and you could arguably say, when Arsenal signed Declan Rice, he's exactly at what they needed at that point, at the right time. So you look at Adam Wharton, do you honestly think that in the summer, if we went to Adam Wharton, whoever would have been the manager at that point, we had a great opportunity then, you think, to say, look, we're going to use that Europa League as what the board at the time as the genuine springboard for success. How far back have we gone, Bob, do you think, since the summer? Because a lot of people were suggesting, and I know you listened to the show, Jason being one of them, that we've killed any momentum of that Europa League trophy. Again, we kept saying on the show that in the last year, when you think about it, we've won a trophy, which was an amazing, amazing week for everyone connected to the football club, fans as well, the parade, Bilbao. We, of course, saw the removal of Daniel Levy, which many Spurs fans saw as a real positive in the fact that he's held back the club for nearly over, a quarter of a century. But both those things happen. But here we are, less than 6-7 months later. And, Bob, it feels like the fan base it's as bad as what it has been before then. And it's almost like the Europa League victory didn't happen. Daniel Levy's exit didn't happen. It's just apathy at that stadium right now, Bob, isn't it? I mean, how do you describe what's happened over the last 6 to 7 months, and still we find ourselves at this real low point, Bob, going into this deadline day where
it's almost like the Sherwood era, I think. Like when Sherwood was in there, he was given the job, but we all knew it was kind of interim just at the end of the season. He was playing out the season, and then Pochettino came in. We had the first season of Pochettino. It felt like a bit of a nothing season, But to be honest, it was probably one of the most important seasons for him to get to know the team. He cleared out the right players. He got rid of the right players and brought through some good players, and then added a couple of players in there. He got his feet under the table is probably the best way to put it. And I feel now next season needs to be a season like that. There's no way we can just bounce back. And like every season for the last few years, I've expected us to be top 5, and have had arguments with all other teams saying, no, we're going to be top 5. We'll be grand. Don't worry about it. Next season, I won't be feeling like that. It doesn't matter who the manager is, and you know I'm a big Pochettino fan. I'd love him back at the club. Even if he's back next season, it's not going to be that. There's going to have to be a reset season after the mess we found ourselves in now.
Yeah,
we have even like the profile of our squad. Yeah, we have some of the best young talent in Europe. I love Lucas Bergvall, Archie Gray. We all love young players coming through. But do we bring players in and potentially stagger maybe the game time they get?
Is that you're worried, Bob, on this deadline day because of the players that have been linked with, because of it being potentially a winger? I mentioned about this earlier. Someone like Sterling, that I know again would very much divide the fan base. Had a very difficult ending to his time at Chelsea. Hasn't played that well at Arsenal. Back obviously now in a situation where he's a free agent, can sign for anybody. Doesn't have to actually be signed on this deadline day. Will one of your biggest worries be, Bob, if Tottenham were to go after a Raheem-style profile or Raheem Sterling himself, that once again that might add as a potential blocker to the pathway of what we're seeing in glimpses from Odegaard and Tell? I'm not saying these two are, I can see them playing for Tottenham in 10 years' time and they're going to absolutely rip up the league and win Ballon d'Or, but there have been certain games where you can see certain promising aspects to that. Is the concern that you bring somebody in on this deadline day which isn't the right fit, and therefore not only impacts the squad, but also impacts the development of players like this, Bob? Would that be the concern for you?
Yeah, you have to balance it. Absolutely. And it's the same kind of with the profile of injuries we have. Do we bring people in when we may have people coming back in 4 weeks? And then you have a bit of disharmony in the club. And I know I'm speaking out two sides of my mouth here and saying we need players, but we do need the right player. Like, they need to be coming in, I think, to improve our first 11, not improve our squad. And I think for too many years, we've brought in players. Now, last year, maybe Danso was the perfect profile. He has stepped up and he has put pressure and he has stepped in when he needs to. But I think, again, even over the Pochettino era, we were always maybe bringing in people to improve the squad as opposed to the first 11, which in turn would improve the squad, if that makes sense. Like, let's bring somebody in. Let's say we bring in a number 9. We need to bring in a number 9 who's better than Solanke, and then Solanke becomes the backup to the new number 9 we bring in. I think that's the type of mentality that you need to get into. And look, by the way, I love Solanke. He wouldn't be one that I'd be worried about. I'm just using him as an example on that. But let's talk about improving the first 11, which will have a knock-on effect on our overall squad, rather than bringing squad players in and then ruining development of potential other players, like the young players coming through. Even your, we have some of the best players coming out of our academy at the moment. Apparently, it's one of the best academies in the Premier League at the moment, players coming through.
But you reckon, Bob, Vuskovic, for example, do you worry about the fact that with regards to him, it looks like he's going to be on loan to Hamburg for another season now? I think Paul O'Keefe's confirmed that he wants to play with his brother next season. I think he actually sees himself as a player that's not quite ready yet for the Premier League, which is admirable, really. I think it's a mature aspect of the kid that he's not demanding minutes. Someone like Dragusin, who's the complete opposite. Do you worry, Bob, about players like Vuskovic, who is seen as a star for the future, what he's making right now of Tottenham, or do you just think he's not even really thinking about that? He's thinking of his own personal development right now, Bob?
Yeah, I 100% worry about it. Like, if I was him and Bayern Munich were sniffing about, would I want to go to Bayern Munich? Yeah, you would. Like, it's like, what's there to come back for at the moment? Like, Vuskovic is a generational talent. Like, do you remember Haaland when he was back in Norway? Then they'd mapped out his career to the top. Now, I'd say he has another move into Real over the next couple of years. Okay, like, I feel that's the exact same with Vuskovic and his family. They, like, even with the low moves, have been so methodical and perfect for him. They've mapped out every move he's had, and I'd imagine they've mapped out his next move from Spurs. So if I'm Lang or Vinay in the summer, I'm saying, yeah, you can go on loan for another season, but you're signing a longer contract. That's the only way I would let him go on loan for another season, is by giving him a longer contract to protect his value.
Yeah. It's difficult, there's so many players right now, Bob, their future is uncertain. I asked about this in the earlier part of the show. Palhinha, what have you made of Palhinha, Bob? Because imagine the club are going to look at his situation in the summer and they'll take a move in terms of whether they should or shouldn't buy him permanently. But I think the feeling is with Palhinha that he's done the job he's been asked to do. He's come in, one of Frank's first signings really that he asked for, got him, done his job. I mean, is there an argument to say that Palhinha's done what exactly he said on the tin, and therefore, is that a player you still has a long-term future here, Bob? I mean, some were questioning about the fact, can him and Gallagher play together? You've got Sarr now that's come back in the last few weeks. I mean, what does the future in your mind look like for someone like Palhinha, who in the summer, of course, Spurs have got to take a decision as to whether they are going to buy him or they would allow him to, of course, let that loan expire, and obviously he'd go back to his parent club, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to him, he's scored a few important goals this season. He's broken up play more than anyone else in the league. He's subbed in, he's filled at centre half this season. Yeah, he's done a good job. After 25 million, would I be taking a punt? I would right now, yes. But is there potentially another better option in the summer? Maybe there is. So I think we have time in that one. I wouldn't be rushing into anything. I think he's got what the club is about. Funny enough, I think he was almost what was missing for Ange in how, we were a bit open last season. He would have been perfect at breaking up play and maybe bringing a bit of stability for, in an Ange team. But right now, would I keep him? Yes. In the summer, let's see what else is out there. But
totally
we should be planning this review. We should be planning for this and looking. And you said there, what have Vinay and Lang and Paratici been doing the last few months? I would hope they're doing something over the next few months in the summer. Maybe they're not, based on what we've seen for this window. But they need to be almost going to whoever the manager is, or whoever's making these decisions, with Palhinha plus 4 other players, and saying, is Palhinha a better option than these other players who are out there at the market at the moment?
Yep. I agree.
Can we trust them? I don't know.
This is the big question. I mean, right now, many would argue we can't trust from what we've seen so far, and we are approaching midday, which means we are going to bring you a transfer window roundup. We'll just quickly ask Bob, how much time have we got you for, Bob? You're here for another half an hour or so? You free? Are you good?
I've got another half an hour. Yeah.
Half an hour or so, perfect. Right, I'd say Connor is coming over very soon from Leaving-Omics, who always is the man for financials, but right now we have to be discussing the transfer window. Before we bring Connor into the show, he'll be joining us very, very shortly. Let's give you a roundup of where we are as we approach midday on this January transfer window update. We'll start back to front, which means we're going to start with the future of Anton Kinsky, of course, the Tottenham Hotspur backup goalkeeper to Guillermo Vicario. As we saw in the later part of last week, that there was genuine interest in West Ham United taking Kinsky on loan to the end of the season, where possibly Tottenham may have ended up with a potential swap deal involving Hermansen, who's not been getting in regular game time at West Ham United. It now appears that isn't going to happen. And as things stands at the moment, Kinsky will remain at Tottenham Hotspur on this deadline day. So as things stands, he will remain a Tottenham Hotspur player. And like I say, at the moment, is going nowhere. In terms of other potential players and their roots being Tottenham players, we've also heard Tottenham are not looking to loan out the forward Mason Melia. Spurs have got genuine high hopes for the player. He's currently nursing a back injury and is therefore going to be given the time to acclimatise and continue working with the Spurs officials at Hotspur Way, where we might even end up seeing him in the second part of the season. So keep an eye on Mason Melia. He's one that's got a potential very, very high ceiling, and maybe Bob will maybe tell us more about this after this break. But yeah, keep an eye on Mason Melia. One Spurs have got genuine high hopes for his future. Sticking with some of the young players, we understand that George Abbott is closing in on a move to Mansfield Town during this January transfer window. It'll give him the opportunity to go out and play regular first-team football between now and the rest of the season, with a view then to going back in the summer and then potentially seeing whoever the manager will be, what their take is on it. But it looks like at the moment, he's on his way to Mansfield Town, and that move is expected to happen. Need to go back to Kevin Danso, because obviously Kevin Danso has been a bit of a warrior for Spurs in this last month or two. He's really had to fight the battles where we've had missing the likes of, only in certain periodic times, the likes of Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero. But there is a genuine concern over the injury that Kevin Danso has sustained. And as things stands at the moment, that he needs to be evaluated further this week. Initial assessments point to a long-term injury, and the concern is around ligament damage. So it doesn't rain, it pours at Tottenham Hotspur. And as we said in the earlier part of the show, we understand that Jed Spence at the moment, whilst the prognosis was 4 weeks given to his injury, he's unlikely return at all in this February period, probably looking at the beginning of March. So difficult, concerning times about players that currently are in the building and when they'll be getting back on the training field. Moving further up the pitch in terms of what we've heard around the forward area at the moment, it was reported that Tottenham are looking to bring in a forward on this deadline day. The club do have a keen interest in Agalouche of Monaco. However, this deal, if it's to get done, and again, we will remind you, we're now approaching less than 7 hours of this deadline day. The deal will be dependent on Monaco finding a replacement if Tottenham were to be able to bring in the player who they've been tracking for the last 3 to 4 windows. We understand Spurs have also had a long-term interest in Curtis Jones. That hasn't changed. It hasn't moved any further forward at the time of this show. So that's where we are with regards to him. No further update on Robertson either, a player that we know Spurs were very, very keen to bring to the football club. However, Liverpool's situation is that if Robertson was to be allowed to leave, they would need a replacement, which makes it very, very hard to see a deal being done, given the nature of the 5 to 6 hours remaining of this transfer window. We can move over to Saudi, where Spurs have been linked with a couple of players. They've been linked with Moussa Diaby. Moussa Diaby has been linked with a move to Tottenham. In terms of his situation, his agent has been in and around London for the last 3 to 4 days, looking to get his client a move. It looked like at one point, only 48 hours ago, he was set to join Inter Milan. However, that deal did fall through at the last minute, and therefore means he's in limbo. He's looking for a move to the Premier League, and he's got now less than 7 hours to find a move. So keep an eye on Moussa Diaby's developments as to what's going to happen with him, a player that we know Spurs are potentially looking at in these final hours. And as things stand at the moment, we understand the club are also interested in John Duran, former Aston Villa striker. Of course, a player that's known to the Premier League, scored goals over here, found himself in Saudi, hasn't had a terrible record over there, but apparently is keen to come back to the Premier League. So we'll keep an eye on that and more. And of course, at the moment, like I say, nothing appears to be close, but we will mention the point. Thomas Frank has insisted Tottenham are looking to be active in this transfer window. And of course, the point as well, the fact that they need players. They need players. I mean, we'll go back to that point, Bob. I'm going to have Colin join us in a couple of minutes. Bob, how important is that? And before we do, guys out there, please, thanks again to the over 15,500 that are with us. If you're able to hit that subscribe button, that will allow you to enter the chat room. You can get involved in the conversation and debate. And that also helps support the show as well by liking and hyping to the show. Bob, I've rattled off there the kind of roundup as to where we are. Talk to us about Mason Melia, Bob. For those that aren't aware of him, a young Irish guy, what would be the excitement of seeing this kid maybe make his debut in the second half of the season?
So for me, I always love to see Irish players playing for Spurs over the years. Obviously, Robbie Keane, even Gary Doherty at one point. It's always great for an Irish Spurs fan to see players coming through from Ireland. I actually haven't seen a lot of them. I wouldn't watch too much League of Ireland, but I've heard about them. Like, I had a text about Melia on my phone in September 2023. This guy's had hype about him in Ireland for years. Similar probably to maybe a Troy Parrott insofar as the hype. Like, everyone knew who Troy Parrott was when he went over to Spurs. It's similar with Mason Melia. Obviously, he's gone over that a little bit later, and he has X amount of senior appearances. You know, he's been playing senior men's football since he was 16. But I'd say about the Irish League, from what I do know about it, is it's physical. Like, it's men playing football. It's a lot more physical. So he'll have been pushed about by full-grown men since he was 16. He scored 14 goals in the league last season. Yes, isn't the strongest league, absolutely not. But he's still playing against physical centre halves and holding his own. I said I haven't seen too much of him. What I can say is that the hype is real about him and has been there in Ireland for about 2.5-3 years. Like, I know City are sniffing around him in 2023. I sent a friend of mine who knows Tony Bloom at Brighton. I sent him a message in 23. I forwarded a message on saying, tell Tony to have a look. Like he, from what I have seen, he's certainly physical enough to play senior football. I think that's probably why they've let Scarlett go out on loan. It's almost a shame, and it seems strange to say this from a development point of view, that we're not in the Europa League this season, because he'd definitely be good enough to be getting minutes there. But unfortunately, we're not firing on all four fronts this season, so we probably don't have the games or the luxury games to be able to throw him in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know I didn't really answer the question you were looking for, because I just haven't seen a lot of them. But look, what I can say is there's been a lot of hype about him in Ireland over the last few years.
Yeah. Con, loves you join us here. Of course, Connor at Leaving Mates 1882, doing some great work with obviously the Whistle Blows. I've had some cracking shows recently. A pleasure to have Con join us. Con, I'd love to be able to start the show and ask you to get your calculator out and say how we're dealing with all these signings on deadline day, but it doesn't feel that that's the case at the moment, mate. It feels that we are pretty much in the reduced section of Lidl or Aldi, with all due respect. Doesn't feel like we're at Waitrose over Nestle at the moment, and we're looking to see what kind of bargains we're looking for on this deadline day. I think me and Bob have tried to be optimistic there might be one coming through the door, but Con, your gut feeling given where we are right now, less than 7 hours of the window to go. Tell us how you are firstly and what you make of this January transfer window deadline day.
Yeah, I'm very good, mate, and it's good to be on and nice to meet you, Bob. I don't think we've met before, but yeah, look, I think I'm going to be glass half full and say we get one in, just because it feels like if we didn't, that would be particular incompetence for us. So I'm going to say we get an attacker in of some description, one of these sort of opportunistic, Muani last day of the summer window type vibes. But yeah, I think it's look, we all know January's difficult. We've spoken about that at length, but what I would say is I think it's really disappointing in a situation where you've got how many players out, 12, 13 players out or whatever it is. We're sitting 14th in the league. So you would have hoped they would have got more over the line, but unfortunately it doesn't look that way. Maybe John Duran might suddenly come available. I don't know, but yeah, it's slightly worrying, mate. I think we're all nervous, but at least we showed up in the second half yesterday, right? And we'll see. But these fixtures are going to be very, very challenging over the next couple of days, next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it feels like it's days, given how quickly they're coming around, Con. Just from your perspective, when you're looking at what we've got to come in terms of fixtures, you're looking at where we are in the league, you're looking at the amount of players Spurs have got injured at the moment. How genuinely concerned are you, Con, by not doing business on this deadline day? Or is it about doing, as I've said to a lot of the guests this morning, doing the right kind of business? I think that would be the key that fans will be looking at. Okay, very well making signings, but how important is it that whoever we're bringing in is the right culture, is the right fit? Because someone like Duran, for example, I think he's had a couple of off-field incidents with managers likes of Unai Emery during his time at Aston Villa. I just wonder from your perspective, whilst there definitely is a need to bring players in, how much about it is it bringing the right profile of player in, given just the fact of the matter is it feels like not everyone's really on board with Frank, and maybe we have got some potential bad eggs behind the scene there. The last thing you want to do, Con, is add to that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think generally that's the rule of thumb, right? That you don't want to sign players that you're then stuck with in the future, and more dead wood that you've potentially got to get rid of. But I think you do have to judge the situation that we're in right now, as you say, with that many players out and where we sit in the league. And I don't think you can almost rinse and repeat these conversations all the time, right? About so we get through a summer window and we go, oh, we didn't do quite enough. But don't worry, we can go to the next one. And then we get in the January window and we say, well, January's too difficult, right? And it just feels rinse and repeat. And it's almost like, well, don't leave yourself in a situation where you're desperately having to try and get something done in January then. And I think the situation that we're in compared, that people will comment, I've seen a couple in the chat already around the fact that, there hasn't been a huge amount of business done by anyone. Yeah, but they're not sitting with 12 senior players missing. sitting 14th in the league as, the 9th richest club in the world, and in the Champions League as well, right? And have just banked 70 to 75 million pounds in prize money from the Champions League. So, given all of those circumstances, you would have hoped that we would have done more, right?
100%. I mean, one of the concerns, Bob, has been, I've not had a chance to touch with you on this, and it'd be good to get Con's opinion as well. We mentioned the injuries there, Bob. How concerning is it that we've actually overhauled the whole medical department at Tottenham, and still, despite doing that, was it 2-3 seasons in a row now, we've got an absentee list of more than 10 plus, Bob? How is that happening? Is this purely coincidence? Are we just a cursed football club? Or do you have a concern, Bob, there's desperately something wrong in the medical department at Tottenham to have this amount of injuries when we are only in February, Bob?
I mean, it could be all three of those, Ricky, together.
Which one do you think it is?
I reckon it's tough to say it's bad luck, but like a lot, like say the Kulusevski, Madison, they've been impact. The soft tissue ones, yeah, there is a trend. I think, there has to be something in the club. I don't know. Are we maybe not taking due diligence when we're signing players? Maybe, looking at their past. I mean, saying that there's players like Slanky who hadn't been injured before they came to us. As soon as they came to us, they got injured. But I reckon it's bad luck on the knocks, like the actual, Kulusevski, Madison, just that happen in tackles with incompetence within the club somewhere. So I'll say 2. You give me 2 out of 3, I can take. I hope, Ricky. There must be something, but like it's 2 managers now as well. Andrew's getting slated for this. It's the way he plays. High line, hamstring. But there has to be something in the back end. I don't know if physios or doctors are letting players go back. The return to play schedules are incorrect or something. There's something there not working in the club, as well as bad luck, and maybe we're cursed as well. But it is alarming. Like, it's every season we're going through this and we're making the same excuses, and you're saying to your mates when they're giving a shit about, when they're having a go at you about Spurs losing, you're saying to them, injuries. And we said that last season. Like yesterday, if you looked at the team we could have put out, we were missing Porro, Spence, there's 2 fullbacks, Romero, Danso, or not Romero, Danso, Van de Ven, Danso. Then you had, you literally had a full 11. Like I put an 11 or 10 together, bar the keeper yesterday. Madison, Kulusevski, Kudus behind us, centre forward of Richarlison and Bentancur and Bergvall and home midfield. Like that team on paper should be a good team. Like it is crazy. There is obviously something broken in the club, that, as well as bad luck with those knocks we're getting.
Do you share that similar view to Bob there, Con, in terms of the medical department? I mean, how are we in a situation, Con, where they've let go some of the most senior heads of that football club in terms of the medical staff, and yet here we are 12 months on, and it's been a regurgitated conversation in the last 3 seasons about the amount of injuries we've got? I mean, seriously, is something wrong there, Con, or is it purely bad luck? And we know with Danso now, I mean, as I said it in the earlier part of the show, Danso, it's understood now, is going to be undergoing further examination, and he could be out for who knows how long. It could be long term. How concerning is that, Con, in terms of the amount of injuries we are continuing to sustain over such a frequent period and the timing of them?
Yeah, I mean, it gets to the stage where it can't be coincidental, doesn't it, when it's happened for that length of time, right? And as Bob said, across 2 different managers, and I think you could go back even further than that, right? In terms of, I think it always seems to be us that are sort of towards the top end of the injuries lists. And as you say, I think there probably is. There's an element of bad luck for sure in some of these, because you can't really legislate for contact style injuries; they just happen. You look at the way Kulusevski did his knee. I mean, that was just a bit of a freak incident, right? But there's got to be something else in it. I think there's with players like Porro, that one felt like it was coming. A hamstring for Porro. I mean, he'd been an absolute freak in terms of the amount of time
so much in games
he'd played. Yep. So I think there probably is something in the fact that because we haven't built a squad in the best way, certain players have to play, so regularly. I think you could probably make the same argument for Kudus, right? And I know we had Johnson, so you could also put that on Frank in terms of he could have rotated him a bit more. But I felt like he was being overplayed a little bit. So there is a bit of that, but yeah, I mean, there's a bit of bad luck in there for sure. Maybe the players that we're actually targeting and recruiting, have we done the best sort of looking into their own injury records and history as well? But I'm sure people in the chat will tell me a lot of these players never got injured before they come to Spurs, and then suddenly they come to Spurs and it looks like it happens. So I think it's a combination of all of those factors, but for sure it's really, really difficult to ever be able to compete at the top level if you're going to have 12 players out, because the squad can only be a certain size, regardless of who you end up recruiting, right?
And talk about competing at the top level, Con. Obviously, it's been a window where we've seen Fabio Paratici. His announcement was made mid-window that he'd be leaving the football club for Fiorentina. I just wonder, from your perspective, just around financials and how that would work, about you're losing one of the two sporting directors mid-window. And quite interestingly, Fiorentina have done 3 deals so far this window. I mean, I ask you to take a hunch, Con. Who's doing those deals for Fiorentina? And is there any kind of irony to that? Here we are on deadline day, we're scraping around, and Fiorentina seem to have their ducks in a row, and the guys not even joined them yet. I mean, how much of a disruption has that been Paratici's future, and the fact it comes out mid-window, we're losing him, and it feels like Johan Lang's at the wheel, and so far this is the evidence of him being at the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about this on previous shows, Rick. This is just beyond farcical, right? The fact that, my view was that post that summer window, I was shocked that this new era, or whatever you want to call it, didn't look at, getting rid of Langer, because I think Langer's history has not been great. Paratici has been a bit of a mixed bag as well, plus obviously the issues with his own morality. Why they didn't take that opportunity. They've made a number of executive hires, but the one that we all really care about in terms of on the footballing side of things, they didn't take the opportunity to hire a new sporting director after the summer. It's disappointing for me. I'm interested to see what they do now post this January window, given what a disaster it's been, both in terms of Paratici going and then just more generally in terms of getting players over the line. So, yeah, I mean, it is just pretty shambolic for me in terms of, and we've spoken about it. I think we've all worked notice periods in our life, right? You're not throwing hell to leather, are you, during your notice period? So I'm sure Paratici is not too fussed in terms of really contributing, and it is interesting that Fiorentina are making signings, as you say. So yeah, I think for me, look, I'm not letting the ownership get off the hook by saying, it's just Lange being shocking. But I think if they are serious, and I say this with a very heavy dose of cynicism, I would expect to see Lange gone in February. And they'd say we're out looking for a new sporting director. That would be the only thing that would suggest to me that they've made the money available and they just haven't delivered on it, for example.
It's quite interesting you say that, Con. Do you think that's independent whether Thomas Frank is the manager or not? You feel they could come to that conclusion, Connor?
I think they should anyway, right? Because I think on the manager situation, I think most fans are still either in a place of, they don't think Frank is the right man long term, or they don't think, or they want to see how it plays out. But for me, if you need to replace Frank, I would not trust Langer or the current mob to pick the next manager. And so, to me, there's a lot of logic in picking a new director of football first and allowing that person to decide what the future of the manager is, right? So, I think it's almost the biggest priority for me.
It's interesting
addressing that side of things.
It's very interesting. I mean, Bob, you were speaking about earlier around the fact of the board and what they've said so far and what they've done. Could you see that, Bob, a world in which we come in this window, and given the fact of what's been promised so far, and many people feel they've under-delivered, could you see a scenario, Bob, where you see someone like Johan Lang depart the football club independent of whether Thomas Frank is here or not?
Yeah, I think it's a great point by Connor. I think do you know what? He can be the ultimate scapegoat for the board, for them to put it on him to buy themselves a little bit more time. And I'm not condoning that. I think it's cowardly to do it. I think everyone's at fault at the moment. But if I was on the board trying to protect myself, I think I would do it. I could see them, because, like, as we said, what's been done the last few months, everyone knew this window was coming and they hadn't prepped for it. Same, and we said it obviously before Connor came on about the summer. We were like, the summer transfer window preparation needs to start tomorrow. And if the first part of that is get the new director of football in, 100%, let's do it. Like I know there was whispers, wasn't there, about Paul Mitchell coming back at one point, or to be involved in some way. I don't know if you saw that or if I'm just making that up or dreaming it. But, you know, do you just go Paul Mitchell tomorrow here, come back to Spurs, here's the keys, you work away? I'm not sure. I don't know if he's the perfect.
It's a very interesting point on that with Paul Mitchell, Bob, because I know they've kind of, you picked this up at all. It didn't appear that he had the greatest working relationship with Eddie Howe at Newcastle. And that lapsed very, very quickly, didn't it? And maybe, like Bob is suggesting there, maybe he would work at a club like Tottenham where maybe it's a certain setup differently to Newcastle. I mean, there's also been in the past mentioned kind of Louis Campos as well, someone that's obviously been on Tottenham's radar. In an ideal world for you, I suppose it all again comes back down to really, does it come back down to who the manager is going to be? Because really in obviously continental football, the way it would work is normally the sporting director is in charge of the manager search. Whereas at Tottenham, let's be honest about it, as Bob, you said as well, it's been quite a fuzzled model with Spurs over many, many years where sometimes you've had the board pick the manager or the sporting director get involved with, obviously, Paratici in the past picking Nuno. How do we actually see that relationship working? And I suppose, again, it goes back to that point, Connor. How much autonomy does actually the sporting director have at Tottenham?
Yeah, I think probably now in today's footballing world, unless you've got a manager who's really established and then suddenly you have to change the sporting director halfway through, like Arsenal have, right? So they've got Arteta who's already in place, and then Edu went and Bert has come in. I think there's a lot of logic though to having the sporting. If you're in a situation like us where you're not sure on the manager anyway, there's a lot of logic in saying bring the sporting director in and let that person then make that decision, particularly as we probably all commented that there's not enough footballing expertise in Tottenham more generally. So for me, I think that's the way we've got to go about it. To be honest, I can't see a Luis Campos happening because of the fact that unless he, for some reason, wanted a massively different challenge to PSG and you threw the bag at him to get him over, I couldn't see that. But I'm sure there are sporting directors around that we could attract if you sold them the right project. But to your point, you've got to give them autonomy, Rick. That is absolutely, you've got to give them. You know, there can't be any of this crap that we've had in the past around, like, you know, Levy's the one negotiating transfers, and in the new world, the board are getting involved in that. I think it's got to be, we'll set the budget, but the way that you spend that and the way that you manage that is up to you. And that's what you see, you know, when, again, I only use them as an example because I know the model fairly well, but and I don't like speaking about them as much as this, but to use Arsenal as a model, you don't speak about, Stan Kroenke's been on the phone to Eze to convince him to join Arsenal. Andrea Burt has been on the phone to Eze to convince him to join Arsenal, right? So, because they've got that level of autonomy. It's very interesting.
Sorry, Ricky. Like, I don't think Lang's even a director of football or sporting director profile. He's an academy man. He's a footballing bureaucrat. He's not a get the deals done type of board member of footballing man. He's not that type of person. Paratici is, and as you say, Connor, like, look, Paratici had his faults, but he got deals done when we needed to get deals done. Yeah, he was hit and miss. You know, there was obviously a few disasters in there, but like, when we, in 2022, when we needed a right-sided player and a holding midfielder or a semi-centre midfielder, he went and got the deals done at the last day. Like, I can't see Lang doing that. And it's because he's not a footballing man, he's a bureaucrat.
Yeah, it goes back to that point, doesn't it? I mean, we even look at the squad that we've assembled now, Con. I think it's a really important point. Just gut feeling for you. I mean, how much of this squad is going to be in 2 to 3 years' time? When you look at, you know, well, I suppose it depends on where you expect Tottenham to be, right? You know, if I'm expecting Tottenham to be, I don't think it's unrealistic. I think Tottenham should be a club that should be aspiring to be in and around the top 6. The ball would say the top 4, right? But we know how difficult the Premier League is. I mean, realistically, based on what you see squad-wise here, Connor, and I'm putting the squad up here, how many players, Connor, do you actually look at and think, right, they are firmly part of Spurs' long-term future for you? Who have you actually looked at here and thought, right, this is our future we should be building around?
Not many. But, you know, this is it does feel like we're constantly in this cycle of rebuilding the rebuild at the moment, doesn't it? I mean, there has been a number of players that have come in and out over the last few years. I think it depends on what you're talking about. My belief is that this is not a 14th place squad, and I think we're all being hindsight merchants because none of us in the summer would have said, I predict Tottenham to finish 14th this year, right? And obviously injuries have played a part, but Frank, and I say this as someone who wanted him, has underwhelmed as well.
Likewise.
So there is a balance to that. I think there are probably a bigger number of that squad that could and should be competing for the European places generally, right? 7th and up. I think if you really want to compete on all four fronts and win more often, as has been the message that we've all been given by the board, then it's a much smaller number. If you want to be competing with Arsenal and City, etc., clearly there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done. But that is going to take a bit of time from where we are. But I think, unfortunately, what you're not seeing just yet is that those steps are being taken to close that gap or address that. And I think that's where fan frustration comes from.
Bob, in your mind, you look at the table, you look at the squad that we've amassed here. How far are we away in your mind from what you want Tottenham to be and what you expect? 'Cause I think when I met you, I think it was during the Pochettino era where, let's be honest about it, we was on an upward trajectory, right? Season 2, 3 and 4, we saw definitive progress of players. We saw us competing in the higher echelons of the Premier League table. I think everyone felt there was a clear alignment. And then obviously the fact that we had a couple of transfer winners where we never spent the money. We had the Champions League final where we never actually built on the strength of reaching a Champions League final. Just back to what Connor said there, how far have we fallen back now, Bob, to even try and get back to the level of competing with a Chelsea, or dare I even mention them down the road? I mean, how many years is this going to take, Bob, to even try and get near these clubs, even if you throw money at it?
I'll put it this way. How long has it taken them down the road? So we beat them to fourth spot in 2022.
Yeah.
And since then, they've consistently backed their manager every single window. First season, they went out, they got Zinchenko, and they bought Gabriel Jesus. They had Saliba come back, okay? And what, 3 years? 3.5 years since then. And that's from a level of them being fifth. Now, so how far off being fifth do I think we are? Fifth or sixth? We'll say top six, because I think that's a reasonable expectation. I don't think we're overly far off it. I think we're probably three first-team players off it. You compare us to a Manchester United. Obviously, Manchester United are a bigger club. I'm not going to sit here and say otherwise. But, they haven't beaten us in the last 5-6 games we played against them. Last season, we beat them 4 times. And yet they're in fourth at the moment because, they made good decisions in the summer. They strengthened. They're probably at FFP. And this is a Manchester United who apparently have no money, who apparently would have gone broke by November and Connor, you definitely know more about that side of football than I do. But yet they found money to go out and buy Mbeumo, Šeško, and Cunha. Now, I don't think Sesko's anything to write home about, but the other two boys, they walk into most teams. But do I think Kudos is far off that? No, I don't. I think we're not and of that, what other United players get in our team? We have a better back four, centre midfield, give or take. Yeah, they probably have two better wide forwards, and then up front we probably have better centre forward. But what I'm saying is there's not much between the two clubs, yet they're sitting in fourth and we're sitting in 14th. Now, do I think we should be finishing ahead of them? Maybe not, but we should certainly be within 3 or 4 points of them and playing good football alongside it. So it's not just where we're sitting, as I said earlier, it's how we're going about where we're sitting. It's going out in a whimper and sitting back and not attacking when we should be attacking. It's going to games like we're a small club and trying to nick a goal. As I said, time wasting against Brentford in the 58th minute. It's all of this. If we were sitting in 14th, playing really good football, and you could kind of say, do you know what, we're a team transition. It's his first season, he's figuring it out. And you'd probably give him a bit of the benefit of the doubt. So in a roundabout, look, where do I think we are? I think we're not far off where we need to be if we're managed correctly and we're set up correctly. Where are we far off in challenging for the league? 5 years. And that's everything going well.
I agree, Bob. I totally agree with that analysis. Right, before we do continue the conversation, we've had some news come through to us here, and don't get too carried away, but it might be something that's worth keeping an eye on. Billy T's been on the WhatsApp to me. Drop me this over, so we're sharing this out to the Spurs community. And by the way, this doesn't mean Billy is driving over on a plane, because I'm sure Connor's got a line into Billy as well, and he'd be letting Connor know what's going on. We are hearing news that at the moment Monaco are looking at trying to do a deadline day move for Simon Adringa. So I'll just repeat that for those that are out there. So AS Monaco, they've made Sunderland winger Simon Adringa a deadline day target to bolster their options up front. Now, this news comes on the back of the fact that in the earlier part of the morning, we heard Tottenham was still remaining keen on trying to bring Agalouche to the football club. However, that move would only be dependent if Monaco were to find a replacement, and it's whether you would believe Monaco are now looking at the Sunderland winger Simon Adringa as a potential replacement for Magus Agalouche. Connor, are we clutching at straws? Or is this something we could be potentially excited about if this move completes? Where are you on this news?
I think we'll take anything we can at the moment, won't we, in terms of clutching at straws. Yeah, I mean, look, Agalouche for me was one, and I'm not going to confess to say that I've watched him every week, right? Or seen loads of him, but what I have seen, I like. I think it was one that seemed doable as well, and I made the argument that if Monaco are playing hardball over money in the situation that we're in, and obviously we shouldn't always do this because otherwise you get into that Man United situation of always overpaying for players, but because of the crisis that we're in, it makes sense to overpay a little bit for him. So if you argue he's worth 45, 50 million, pay 55, 60, right? Just because we need to get him in, and the boy's clearly got some talent. So yeah, we'll see. I think we're reaching a little bit. Dan Paskins just said in the chat, is it to potentially replace a 19-year-old that went to Saudi? I don't know exactly who that is, but
interesting.
Yeah, I think Agalouche is an exciting player that everyone could get behind.
Yeah,
for those who have seen him.
Bob, you were suggesting earlier you don't think Tottenham are done. They might have one big signing left in their wallet before the end of the window. This news coming through to us again. I mentioned the fact Monaco are trying to get a deal done for the Sunderland winger Simon Adringa. What do you make of this, Bob, for you? Is this something that we should be looking at quite positively, the fact that they're trying to bring a player in, or is it really your guess is as good as my guess right now, Bob? Is that kind of where we're at the moment?
Look, I've been too negative on this show so far, so I'm going to say it gets done. We're going to finish on a positive. I'll ask you guys a hypothetical. Would you take Agalouche with Tel going to Monaco on loan to the end of the season to fill their gap?
Personally, for me, yes, I would. I would. I mean, I just think from what I've seen from Tel, I've seen promising flashes, but I've not, and Colin can come in as well, I've not seen enough to convince me that this guy has got a genuine long-term future at Tottenham. I love his encouragement, his endeavour. But there's nothing that tells me that letting this player go, we're letting go a world beater. I don't know whether, Con, you agree on that with Tel. Where were you if that option came up?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I think we're in the situation where we probably can't because of numbers.
We probably can't. Yeah.
It doesn't help us having 1-for-1, but in that example, Bob, yeah, I would as well, because I think Agalouche would offer us more than Tel right now. But yeah, obviously would prefer that we don't get rid of Tel because I think we just need the bodies. But if that was the only way that we could get over the line, I would go for that for sure.
Would you do it, Bob?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking. I feel I know we're low on bodies. Does it make sense though? It probably does make sense for a lot of the parties. Like Tel needs game time. Monaco needs someone to replace Agalouche. We get rid of so we loan them for the season. He's back next season. He gets more minutes and development wise, and we get an upgrade on him in a similar position. I just don't know how it hasn't probably come out yet, or how it hasn't been suggested. I know, look, numbers were low, we're light, but yeah, I would do it, Mr. Cool.
I think with Tel, though, we're at a situation now where if this move was to happen for him, there'd have to be clearly feeling that, I don't know if you agree, Connor, there'd have to be something that's fundamentally broke down in the connection with him and Frank, because it appears in the last 24, 48 hours, the feeling has been Frank and Tel had a conversation, and it appears that whatever the issues have been behind the scenes, which again probably is down to lack of game time or limited game time, that appears to have been cleared up. So if we have to take something now completely, utterly catastrophic in their relationship. The fact that he'd want to get out now on deadline day, is that fair? Kind of given the supposed lack of options. And I agree with what you said. We shouldn't be in a situation now where we're looking to bring one in to let one go. But I know Bob's hypothetical quick question there is, I would definitely swap Akalush for Tell. But if we're losing Tell now, something's fundamentally gone wrong in that relationship. Con, is that fair to say?
No, I agree. I think to me, Tell doesn't strike me as his complaints are coming from any place other than game time and being messed around with the Champions League squad and that type of thing, right? I don't think he isn't the type who's he's got a pretty good attitude. I don't think he would have been turning up late for training and all of that type of jazz, right? So yeah, I think he only goes now if something really catastrophically changes. Because with the Akliush, we've already lost Johnson, right? So
Yeah.
you already lost one, and then obviously had a couple of injuries since then with Kudus and Richarlison in terms of the attacking position. So, and we needed an attacker anyway. So, that's probably what makes it so disappointing that we haven't managed to get one over the line. And I'm not saying selling Johnson was the wrong thing, because I think it was the right thing to do. And I was happy that we were starting to move in that way of being more decisive around selling players, but to do that without getting, another attacker in would be hugely disappointing.
Bob, where are you on the Brennan Johnson? Just sale quickly. I haven't had a chance to ask you this. Would you have been in favour of letting him go, but maybe in the latter part of the window, or do you think we just did what was right at the time and offers came in?
I think it was right at the time, Ricky.
Yeah,
I think it was. I think for too long we've been bad at selling players at the right time.
Yeah,
And yeah, like I look, we weren't to see what was going to happen. So yeah, I think it was the right time.
Yeah. Again, it's funny because Brennan, I say it's funny. Listen, the kid's gone there. He's not exactly pulled up trees with Palace at the moment. If anything, the Palace fans are thinking, what have we paid our money on? But, Brennan was always one of those players that really he was going to have to, realistically going to have to play in a certain style to make it fit. Look, we're going to go for our next break of the show. Bob, I want to say a massive thank you for coming on and making it work. Bob, thanks as always. Where can we find you in the Spurs community? Let them know where they can find you.
Just on Twitter, Bob_Spurs. If you want some, the toxic side of me coming through this season, but normally I'm pretty positive. So look, I've been negative so far. I'm going to be finished positive. We're going to get 6 points from the next 3 games. I'm going to leave it at that. You can decide what games we take the points from. So I'll let you go.
Bob, you've been a superstar. Look, we're going to go for our next
break. All the best, Connor. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you, mate.
Top man. Look, thank you so much, Bob, for your time. You've been great. We're going to quickly hear from Thomas Frank, and then we're going to hear from Connor. And we've got some incoming guests as well on this show as to what Frank made of that result against, of course, Man City, and what he hopes is going to give him the opportunity to really give him the best chance in terms of upcoming fixtures. We're going to hear from Thomas Frank, and then when we come back, we'll be giving you a transfer window roundup of a summary and getting into where we are as of this moment. Let's quickly hear from Thomas Frank.
Thomas, try to put into words that second half. It feels as though there was an enormous amount of character on show this afternoon.
Yeah, very, very proud of the players, the character and mentality they showed, especially second half. I think that was hugely impressive. Of course, we are 2-0 down to City, who is in a good place, the best team in the Premier League last 7-8 years, and the way the players kept going second half, kept having the belief. We were a bit better in the high pressure. We adjusted that second half. The middle pressure also better, so we couldn't get anyone through. We played a little bit more behind them. We just showed a bit more personality. But actually that character and mentality, I think I'm so happy that the players finally got something out of it, because I actually think we showed that against second half West Ham, second half Villa, second half Bournemouth, and we lost all 3, where we should have gone more out of it. So now we got a result on top of that to build on 3 other good performances. So we build on something that's hugely important.
Can you break that down a little bit further for me tactically in terms of the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half? Because it felt as though the game had got a little bit slow and a little bit passive, and you felt immediately in the second half the intensity of the team, the work rate. So much of that stuff, I suppose, is less tangible, but you definitely felt it in the stadium.
Yeah, and I think it's also a little bit score related, and we just got to, boom, break. Okay, now we can adjust a little bit, and then we go again. I think we tried to go high in the pressure, but in first half also all the second ball situation, either we were not strong enough or we were a little bit unlucky it's not landing for us. Whereas second half we're both a bit stronger and we also landed for us in the high pressure situations. So that was one thing. And then when you get the goals, a little bit setback, you drop a little bit, and now you reset, boom, then you go again. So that's of course things we need to be better to do in games. So I'm disappointed we conceded the second one, which we should never do in our own situation there.
I'm fascinated by the tactic side of it, Thomas, because look, let's remember this is Man City, okay? You're 2-0 down at half time. You've got to chase the game, but you can't let them score the third goal. So what's that tightrope like?
Yeah, but and we talked about, of course, also it's 1 moment at a time, 1 minute at a time, big belief out there on the pitch. And then we know, of course, we can't just bombard forward, so we need to have a little bit of adjustment so they can't have an easy transition. But I think the players were so switch on in those situations.
And you're playing 3-4-3, you're playing 3 centre-backs, and when you step out for the second half, you've lost your 3 centre-backs, including your captain, and you haven't got your 2 right-backs. Yeah. 1 left-back's gone.
Yeah, I mean, we had to be a little bit creative. We had to be a little bit creative second half. So we just changed it a bit. So we defended a little bit more in the 4-4-2 than the 3-4-3. But of course, as I said, we ended with Archie, Joao as in a back 4. Dragusin played his first game in 12 months in the Premier League. Wow, and what a performance. And we ended with Jonai as a right midfielder as well. So we are down to the bare bones, so that we're hanging there. So I think we're close to score on the Wilson situation. And then I'm thinking, can't lose this one. That would be mental. It'd be not fair.
And that's why we can't shout it loud enough. You're 2-0 down against Man City. We've got 11, 12 players out, and we've come back to draw 2-2. I mean, come on.
I think it shows everything from the player. I think the fans should be so proud of the players, what a shift they showed today. And now we've got something out of it, something to build on, and we need to carry on.
Can I just a couple of final ones? Firstly, Xavi Simons at the moment, the way that he is both working, the creativity, the effort that he's showing going the other way. Spurs have had a history of producing number 10s and playing number 10s that get the crowd on their feet, but I think you're seeing 2 sides of Xavi's game. You're seeing the fact that he can create, but he's so prepared to do the hard work as well.
No, he's Xavi's a winner, a big winner. He's very creative, and I think we see more and more of his creative side. But the winner and the mentality to want to land on second balls, to do the counter press, to win the duels, which is part of football as well. And then when he has front against the goal, that's why he's electric and showing moments. So now he's really growing.
And Dom Solanke as well. We've spoken a lot about him over the last few weeks, but I think he keeps showing, doesn't he, more and more just what he brings to this team.
I think it's quite evident why he's been missed so much. So now he's been playing 4 games, 4 goals. I think that's one thing, but also his presence on the pitch, hold up play, his leadership. I know he's big for us.
And finally, you've got injury after injury after injury. Where are we at the end of that game? How do we leave N17 tonight? Is there any good news, or is everyone sort of going to be okay after that?
We will, of course, assess players, but as I said before the game, we're quite confident that Min-hyeok should be available for Man United. Jet, we don't know, but could be a shorter one, and then we'll take from there.
Is Kuti okay, by the way?
Yeah, he had some illness, also played with illness in the Frankfurt game, so he's been a little bit down and really pushing. So we have assessed him and we'll assess him further, so hopefully it's nothing big.
And one last one quickly. We all heard the reaction of the stadium when Dominic scored that goal. What was the reaction on the bench when you saw the replay?
Good, I think. I don't know.
You know, when they played the replays, everyone was going,
"Wow!"
Did you hear that, or are you?
No. I was just in the game.
He's already on the next phase.
Yeah. We had to win. We had to win.
3-2. What a great goal!
Yeah, it was an amazing goal. Amazing. We trained it the other day, of course.
Thomas, thanks so much, Jordy.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well done, Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Keep going.
So that was Thomas Frank there on the back of Spurs, rescuing a point, of course, against Man City in a crazy 2-2 draw where he came from 2-0 down. We'll touch a bit about that. We'll touch a bit on the scheduled process and what you made of that as well. But, I mean, Frank's interview there, what are you making of it? Again, with deadline day for context at the moment, I haven't got anything right now to suggest that players are on the brink of coming in. thoughts on Frank's interview there, and does that give you any optimism given the fixtures to come and the challenges Spurs have in their sights?
Yeah, I mean, again, look, just to reiterate, I say this from a position of someone who was advocating for Frank, and I'm very happy to, acknowledge that I've been underwhelmed and been wrong so far, and so this is not flip flopping. It's providing this view based on the evidence of data of how he's done, since he's been at Spurs. But for me, the slightly worrying thing is it almost takes us going behind to then suddenly, bring out a attacking performance, and that's probably because you suddenly see that we play with a different type of intent, right? As soon as we go behind in games or the situation is thrown, like the Liverpool game is another example. When we went down to sort of 9 men, I actually thought we probably deserved to beat Liverpool, right? Even with 9 men in the end, and it's almost like the point at which tactics are thrown out the window, you suddenly see Tottenham playing in a different way, at least going forward with the ball. And I think it's been really difficult for us to put two halves together in any game, right? It's either we have a decent first half and then we're winning, and then we let the other team come on to us, and it gets and it gets worse, or equally it goes the other way, right? And we're behind, and then suddenly we throw a bit more caution to the wind, and we look a different team. So yeah, I think that's something that needs to change, and I think that's probably why you've got a lot of unhappiness right now in terms of the on-pitch stuff, because I think a lot of people are feeling like, there's too much of a focus. I think we've gone from one extreme to the other, right? A lot of people have spoken about this. It's almost Ange was not fussed at all about the opponent. Frank is too fussed about the opponent. We need somewhere in the middle, and I have to say, there has been some stuff. I think in the first couple of games in Frank's reign, and even when I watched him in some performances at Brentford, I was really impressed with like the sort of man-to-man press that he put in place. And I'm talking about like Man City away for us and the PSG Super Cup game. I was like, they were really promising early signs, and then he sort of seemed to go completely back on that and then start, settling into this sort of mid-block with no press at all. And then obviously on the ball, a lot to the left to be desired, right? And so I think there is still a lot that needs to happen for him to convince the fans that he would be the right person going forward. Obviously, there's issues that are bigger than Frank. We've spoken at length about the fact that with the ownership and the director of football and all of that type of stuff and signings and the squad. But I would have expected a little bit more from him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely fair points. And I think, we are at this place now where, again, people will be looking at the fact of Spurs and their lack of business so far in this window will maybe scream the fact kind of that they're very much undecided on the manager. Has that been for you an unwanted distraction? Has that in a way played into the Ball's perspective of the fact that we've had scheduled protests around him? And also just to go back on that point, I know you're going to touch upon the protests as well, but I have to also make this point. Again, me and you have both been of the similar mindset. We've asked for communication from the Ball, but I just want to make a point of what did you make of that from Vinay to have that mid-window to come out with that communication 24 hours before a protest was organised by Change for Spurs about the fact we're going to up the wage structure, we want to bring in quality players mid-window, and since then until now, at the time of recording, we've done nothing else. So I just wonder, what have you made of that timing around the Vinay statement? Because again, not only hypocritical, we've asked for communication, but to get it mid-window and then do nothing since then, what does that tell you?
Yeah, look, I think that communication that was in the programme was a direct response to both the statement from the Trust and also the Change for Tottenham protest, right, and the fan discontent. I don't think that was intended to or would have been released at that point had it not been for those things. It's the sort of statement you'd expect at the end of a window typically, but as you rightly point out, nothing has really changed, or and actions will speak louder than words, and they'll be judged accordingly on that. I don't think, for me, someone's made the point in the chat, right? Phil Spur 1882 about we need an identity we can back, and that starts from the board level down, and I think it's spot on, right? Culture is set from the top, You know, in any organisation, football club is no different. Culture needs to be set from the top. It needs to, and I think some of the issues that we have at Tottenham is because if you compare the culture that's been set at Tottenham under Enoch compared to who we are apparently competing with, the history has been, you know, we don't have that unfettered ambition to win in the same way that other football clubs do. And that then seeps into everything that you do, right? Everything becomes substandard, or you know that you're not going to be in a situation where your absolute priority is to compete at the top always and to win. And I think that's what you're seeing play out, right? And I think you've got that from a cultural side, and then in terms of an identity side, we keep flip flopping between different managers who then want different styles of players. So then you're rebuilding the rebuild, as I said earlier, and so you know I think it's this is my point about the next director of football and having that alignment right with who. Because look, I want the owners to change. I'm not going to change my view on that, but I obviously am not naive enough to think that that is going to happen overnight. And you know, it's up to them when they sell the football club, right? So, in the event that that is not going to happen and that's taken off the table, you know, what do I want them to do differently? Well, I want them to put in place a proper football operation whereby they have a top class director of football who then sets an alignment with the manager going forward. And then, you know, this is the way that we're always going to play going forward. And this is our priority in terms of the types of players we sign. And then what happens is that then supersedes whoever is sitting in the managerial seat, right? Because we all know that managers don't last typically as long as they used to.
Not at Tottenham
Look how many
anyway.
we've had,
Definitely not
but
Tottenham.
this is the case at most football clubs. And so what you want is you don't want to be in a situation where you go, oh God, we can't play this player anymore because the manager has changed. You want a philosophy, an ethos, an identity that supersedes managers.
I agree. I mean, just on that point, Con, you spoke about the ownership there and the time. I mean, this is one of those things, isn't it? A lot of people have been suggesting we've got to give them 2 windows. Give them 2 windows. Let's see what they've got, and then we'll judge it in 2 windows' time. I think, you know, we understand how difficult the January transfer window is in terms of bringing genuine quality players in. I mean, a lot of clubs have struggled, right? You look at what Man City have done this window. They brought Semenyo in based on who had a release clause, and they got Mark Gay, who was in the last 6 months of his contract. But if I was to say to you right now, given the nature of our precarious position in the league, look, I don't think we're going to get relegated. I think what that result did for us against Man City has probably consolidated the fact we're going to be here, haven't got too many concerns. What are we now? With a goal difference, we're 10 points clear of the relegation zone. And then coupled with the fact we have got a Champions League, you know, tie to look forward to, or to know the result or the outcome of who that's going to be very, very shortly. Alongside that, we've got 12 injuries right now. I mean, I'm trying to look at this through what a logical club would do that want to be at the football club long term. To me, there would have to be some sign of investment. I know they've brought in Souza, who, again, we don't know too much about the kid, but there's some promising hope that he's going to come in and actually now be part of the first team. There were suggestions in the earlier part of the window he was going to go out on loan. Looks like he's going to be here. And of course, Conor Gallagher has come into the club, and I think you can also see that he is definitely right for Tottenham right now. Whether long-term he's the right player for the club remains to be seen, but he's going to make a difference right now. What else, Conor, really would have been, look at this window, areas of significant improvement? Because you could also argue, well, all they've done is replaced the injured players, right? So it's a really difficult balancing act. And you know yourself, because again, the people you mix with in the footballing circles and financial circles as well, how difficult this window to do business is. But the pre-planning of it, we go back to the protests. I mean, are these things really making a difference, the protest? I mean, again, there was that one, of course, we saw yesterday. There was a scheduled walkout, wasn't there? Forgive me. Didn't appear. This is the hard thing. I don't know if you agree, Conor. Again, you're a match-going fan as well. Because of the nature of that game, I think you would have got a degree of some response at the score remained at 2-0. But the minute Spurs get the goal back of 2-1, and the nature of how expensive it is to go to Tottenham, who is going to really walk out of their seat at 2-1 and then 2-2 and then tell you might win the game? Do you know what I mean? I know, again, there was that kind of conflict around whether we wanted to help Arsenal and that element to it, but I just don't think Spurs fans are built that way. Is that fair to say based on the lack of numbers there were walking out of the stadium yesterday?
Yeah, I agree. Look, I think there's a couple of points. One on the transfer window. Just I think if you're coming out with messages like that we want to compete on all four fronts and we want to win more often, right, and be at the top of the table. I think when you're sitting 14th, it is unforgivable to have a window like this, in my view. Regardless of whether January is difficult, there is an opportunity cost to everything you don't do, as well as what you do. And not doing anything in this situation, to me, is leaving another manager, whether you think Frank is the right man or not, you're making it even worse, right? Given the players, as we spoke about earlier, given the players we got out. And again, I don't like the January excuse, because then you just go back to the summer and say, well, do more in the summer when you were in a situation you could have done more. And, we all were screaming out for a left winger and a forward in the summer. So that's that on the window. And I also think, if you really want to close the gap on the clubs that we should be competing with, based on where we sit in terms of the size of football club we are and how we are financially, you want to be coming out of every single window feeling like you are improving, not getting weaker. I don't think there's any fan that can't say that we're coming out of this January window. The squad is actually weaker, right? In terms of, because of now some of that is short term because of injuries, but we've sold Johnson, not replaced. Whether you like, as I said earlier, that's the right thing to do, but it has to be replaced, right? So, and as you say, Gallagher, it feels like, was only brought in really because of the injury to Bentancur. So, I mean, that's got to be your first priority, is that you go into every window, come out of every window stronger than you went into it. And at the moment, they're not really demonstrating that necessarily. I think on the protest point, I agree with you on the walkout. I think, look, I wasn't actually at the game yesterday because I had prior commitments. I'd already got rid of my tickets, but I've been supportive of the protests because I'm critical of the ownership. But my view is that the walkout was not the best tactic to use. And look, the guys are learning on the job as well. None of them are professional protesters or anything like that, right? They are just trying to do their best for the cause that they believe in. So, I think no one should be too critical of that. But I think the problem with the walkout is so dependent on game state, right? To your point, clearly, a lot of fans also are not as invested in the ownership and the problems with the ownership. There's probably a percentage of the match going fans who don't even know Enquiries are, right? And so you're fighting a bit of a losing battle, I think, as well. And so, and to make that sort of walkout noticeable, you've got to have thousands, right? Because the stadium's 62,000, everyone's spread around. To make it even noticeable, you've got to have probably thousands walk out. And obviously they're not at that stage where that's those sort of numbers. So I think change for Tottenham need to take probably a regroup, restock in terms of the way that they can do certain things. I think match going fans, there is a difference between match going fans and the online community, and the fact that, to be honest, there probably is a number of people who are critical of ENIC that are just not going to games anymore, right? So you've got some that live abroad and those types of things, but some that have just said, look, I don't want to give my money to this ownership anymore, and I've given up my season ticket, or I'm not going to watch the games live anyway. And so you're already taking away those people from what you do. I think change for Tottenham have to look at monetising themselves. I said this to you last night, Rick, when we were chatting about it. I think they need to, look at something like an annual membership to change for Tottenham. If that's a cause you believe in, and you say, look, it's a 10 or 20 quid a year.
Yeah.
You get a free scarf, and now we're going to use that money to focus on marketing. And, for example, I don't think Change for Tottenham have ever done flyers around the stadium. We know the Man United demonstration that was organised by the 1958 group yesterday. I mean, they've printed something like 25,000 flyers or something, right? And so you can start to advertise in a way that isn't just the people that are in our bubble of YouTube and social media. And it's just about becoming a little bit more strategic, I think. But I do think there probably is just now an opportunity to take a bit of stock and revisit. But obviously, I'm massively supportive of the cause, and in terms of, because I do want an ownership change, and I also appreciate what a difficult job it is, and it's very, very easy for all of us to judge them on the job they're doing, but they're doing their best.
Yeah, it's just difficult, isn't it? Because again, we're going to send everybody over. We've got a new link for 1 p.m. by the way. You're going to be redirecting the second to our 1 p.m. show where we've got additional guests joining myself and Connor on there. And I think just to wrap up this on the change for Spurs protest and everything around that, Connors. I think, mate, we've known each other now for around a year or so. You know, I was someone in the past that very much was trying to see what they were trying to do and giving it time. But I think, look, I've certainly had my vocal presence made aware in the last year or so that I just don't see anything changing under this ball. I just don't see anything. I think we are genuinely stuck in a Mike Ashley hamster wheel until there is genuine change at the football club. I mean, also, look, at least give it until the summer. At least give them like a summer window. But even by the nature of what's happened around Paratigi's exit mid-window, the communication for me is a big thing. I think one of the things that I liked about Vinay when he came in, I really felt with Vinay that he was a clear communicator. Did feel like there was a bit of something about him. But then the more you have seen what's happened over the last few months, I've just got very, very deep concerns about how much of a leader he is on that board and who is actually willing to make tough decisions. I'm not saying that you sack a manager in 5 minutes if the results aren't going well, but the reality is, if you look at Frank this season, there's been several occasions where you felt we've had an unacceptable performance, which is so below what it should be, that there should be an element degree of pre-planning. I think sometimes not done enough pre-planning, whether it's around managers, whether it's around players, whether it's around any kind of genuine targets. And that's why I am massively concerned about the future of the football club. I look at us now, like you said earlier there, Connor, we're 14th in the Premier League. We're not going to go down now, so you haven't really got that jeopardy, I don't think, unless we have a catastrophic run coming up. We've got 12 senior first-team players injured right now. So you would think we've got the Champions League to also contend with. The commentary you said as well in the summer was around the fact they want to, make sure we compete on all four fronts. Well, right now, the only front we're generally competing on is the Champions League, because you can't tell me we're already competing on the Premier League front. Kind of, we're 14th in the Premier League, unless this is what this ownership expects Tottenham to be. We're not a 14th place team. You look at the last 2 seasons out of the last 21, 22. I mean, Spurs have generally finished in and around the top 8, the top 10. I mean, even that now seems to be getting warped in terms of the standards. And even yesterday on social media, putting out posts of never say die. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm coming through a different level of what I thought Tottenham was. I'm really struggling to understand our identity, Conor. I don't know if you're the same as me. I'm really struggling to have any kind of connection with the football club at the moment. Really struggling.
No, I agree with that. And look, I do not accept this argument where people say that Spurs have unreasonable expectations, because I think, as I've said to you before, Rick, we were not the ones that tried to take us into the European Super League. We can all read that we are the 9th richest club in the world. We have if not the highest, the second highest season ticket prices in Europe. So all of those things set a level of expectation. When we built the new stadium, we were told that it was going to be a game changer and we were going to dine at the top table for signings. So there's been lots of instances of this. And again, the statements in the summer, they are the ones that have come out and said they want to compete on all 4 fronts and win more often. So it's absolutely not acceptable for Tottenham to be anywhere other than mixing it in the big 6, right? And at that top end of the table. Now, obviously, we're not in that situation right now, but that shouldn't tell us that we shouldn't be. So they need to be doing what they need to do to get us back to that level again. But look, I agree with you. I think most people said, they were going to give this a chance. I don't think no one's naive enough to think like making ground scale changes like they've been doing at the is going to suddenly lead to immediate results, right? When you've had years and years of mismanagement, it's going to take time to get out of that. I think Spurs have been more patient than most, right, in terms of this stuff. But what you want to see is that they're taking the steps to do that. And if I look, let's look over their reign then, instead of and give them the benefit of the doubt that it's a rebrand and whatever else. Well, during that time, they've rehired Paratici formally in September, even though with his past, was that the right thing to do? Bottled a decision to have one sporting director and did this nonsense around having 2 sporting directors, one of which is completely incompetent, the other one is semi-incompetent and a criminal. That one of those has now left and was rumoured to be leaving even before the next transfer window started. So within 4 months, you've had that happen. They've taken out a loan from Macquarie Bank to borrow against future Premier League revenues to the tune of about 90-100 million. plus injected 100 million themselves, but we haven't seen any of that translate to any sort of action in the transfer window. And at the same time, we're left in the dark around Frank. So they've done a piss poor job as well so far, right? And so we can judge them on that. It's early to judge them, but you're not seeing those green shoots, right? And look, for Frank, this is not me saying that I don't think it's right to stick by Frank, but I would have almost more respect for Vinay if they come out and made a statement and said, during this run, we think Frank's the right man. We're going to stick with him. He's got a contract till X date. Because at least you could then go, well, at least he's clear in his convictions in terms of that decision was made.
Yeah.
We're just left in the dark around what's happening, as you say. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do either. But if you're going to stick with him, either stick with him and back him, or move, or move on. It's this halfway house all the time.
Totally agree. Look, we are overdue a 1 p.m. update. So me and Connor are going to be joining you over on a fresh new link in a second. So you are going to be transferred, I understand, over to the new link. But if you are not able to transfer over and you've just had this on dormant for 3 hours sitting in the background, whether you're working from home or you're just chilling and waiting for news on the transfer window, all you need to do is come out of here, go to the next Last Word on Spurs link lined up for 1 p.m. and we'll see you in there and provide you a conclusive update on where we are. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this first part of the show. We'll see you over for our 1 p.m. update in under 5.